Chapter 636. In less than 5 seconds. In the area within 10 meters of Pride, the flowers that were originally blooming were all petrified into gray and hard stone works. I forgot to tell you. This is the manifestation of Pride's ability to parasitize me, the petrification curse. Pride slowly retracted her palm, raised her delicate chin, and said coldly, "Any creature or object touched by me will be turned into stone for a certain period of time, unable to move." A gust of wind blew over the garden, but the Ant-Man was still nowhere to be seen. In this regard, Pride slightly raised the corner of her mouth and whispered confidently, "Petrified?" Unable to move, according to the rules of the game, it's considered a defeat. Behind Pride, Wrath was still kneeling on the ground. He covered his lower body, desperately trying to stop the bleeding. However, because the wound was caused by the sodium-carbon steel sword, not only did the bleeding not stop, but more and more. This feeling was like a girl in her menstrual period. Wrath's face was pale and bloodless, let alone angry. He calmly said with difficulty, "Don't be careless. Observe carefully, according to the opponent's ability and personality, he may have other means." Pride glanced at him disapprovingly, "Come on, take care of yourself first. Your current appearance is extremely ugly. If you weren't too careless, how could you be so seriously injured?" If it was the original Cadus, they would naturally be united and cautious. Unfortunately, their bodies were possessed by the 7 deadly sins. While gaining a strong physique and ability, their temperament would also be changed by the possessed evil spirit. Borrowing the power of the 7 deadly sins had obvious advantages and disadvantages. This was also the reason why Kale didn't need the 7 deadly sins. It was enough for him to have venom occasionally. If he had the 7 deadly sins, he might as well have a party in his body. Wrath and Pride didn't notice that in the sky, there was a flying ant flying over their heads, about 20 meters in the air. On the back of the flying ant, the Ant-Man was sitting on it, observing the movements of the two below. That was a close call. "Fortunately, I brought you here, Anthony," the Ant-Man whispered in bewilderment. He rubbed the flying ant's body with both hands, and the flying ant happily circled in the air. Its size was so small that it was like a speck of dust in the sky. No one could discover its existence. "Now, let me see how to deal with those two." Ant-Man took a deep breath and looked down at Pride and Wrath, who were leaning against each other. Although Fury was injured, according to the system rules, she was not considered to be eliminated. And their Deadpool is already dead, so they can only rely on him to continue fighting. Pride's petrification ability was obvious to all. They were no match for her in close-range and long-range combat. The only way to defeat them was to launch a surprise attack that would kill them in one hit. I can only use that move. I hope it works. The Ant-Man thought for a moment and made up his mind. Clenching his right fist, he placed his left hand on his belt and began to adjust the parameters. Then, he jumped off Anthony's back. It was only about 20 meters, but in the eyes of the miniaturized Ant-Men, it was as if they had jumped down from a height of 200 meters. Ant-Man plummeted face first, looking at Pride and Wrath, who were getting closer and closer. In the air, he turned the button to the maximum. Success or failure depends on this move. The next moment, the Ant-Man's body, which was originally the size of an ant, suddenly expanded, surpassing the size of a human. It continued to grow to a height of 20 meters, until it was the size of a small mountain. The miniaturized Ant-Man had successfully turned into a gigantified Ant-Man. With the inertia of falling, he used all his strength in his right hand and punched downward. Pride and Wrath noticed something strange above their heads. They looked up and saw a fist as huge as a meteor. Damn it! Seeing this, Wrath could not care less about the injuries on her lower body. She struggled to stand up from the ground, gritted her teeth, and pushed her hands up. Wrath's superhuman strength increased and blocked the gigantified Ant-Man's fist. Bam! Withstanding the Ant-Man's fist, Wrath's feet were like wooden stakes. Her calves sank into the ground, and the wound on her lower body began to bleed. Wrath, hold on like this. Pride reacted quickly. She stretched out her left palm and pressed it against the Ant-Man's fist under the effect of the petrification curse. The Ant-Man's gigantified fist began to petrify rapidly from the middle finger and spread to the entire gigantified right arm. Soon, the right hand from the wrist down was petrified. Half of the Ant-Man's right hand had lost feeling, so he could only continue to exert strength. However, his fist was blocked by Wrath, and they were in a stalemate for a while. If this continues, my body will be completely petrified. The gigantified Ant-Man was helpless. It's over, big bug. Pride was victorious. She continued to stretch out her right hand and cast her ability with both hands to speed up the petrification curse. The Ant-Man's entire right arm was petrified. Seeing that the petrification was about to spread to its chest and head, the sound of wind breaking suddenly came from behind Pride. Splat! The sharp tip of a sword pierced through Pride's back, penetrating her body and coming out of her slightly larger chest with shocking red blood. Who is it? Pride's eyes widened as she spat out blood. Her hands lost their strength and fell down. She fell straight forward to the ground. Behind her, a despicable figure stood up again. Wrath withstood the Ant-Man's petrified fist and looked at the enemy who attacked Pride. She said in disbelief, "How is this possible? I finished you off with my own hands. Even your bones are crushed." Who said that you'll die when your bones are crushed? In my dictionary, there is no such thing as death. Deadpool smiled. He took a few steps out, picked up his katana, and threw it at Wrath as a spear. His target was still her injured lower body. Fuck. Wrath burst out a curse. Unable to bear it, he finally reached out to catch the thrown sword. The Ant-Man's gigantified and petrified fist was completely smashed into the ground. Finally, it worked. The Ant-Man held his petrified right hand and looked down at Deadpool, who was completely fine. He shook his head and said, "I knew it. A despicable person like you, if you don't have a special life-saving ability, I'm afraid you would have been killed long ago. Are you praising me or scolding me?" Deadpool spread his hands. Before the two could talk too much, a deafening sound came from the fountain park next to them. Chi, a black figure was thrown high from the fountain park. The gigantified Ant-Man was quick and caught the figure firmly with his left hand. He took a closer look and saw that it was the poison agent. To be more precise, it was half of the poison agent's body. The poison agent's body turned into countless black lines that were still squirming. Eddie, who was wrapped inside, only had half of his body left. The black lines were mixed with blood, making the Ant-Man and Deadpool take a deep breath. The poison agent was defeated. Chapter 637. Even if he lost half of his body, Eddie still did not die immediately, and the symbiotic toxin in his body maintained his life. Eddie's body twitched slightly, and the black liquid on his body was frantically bandaged to stop the bleeding, but it still didn't help. The injuries he suffered were too serious, and normal people would have died long ago. "Run, run!" Lying on the palm of the giant Ant-Man, Eddie, who had half of his body, opened his mouth, and words came out from the depths of his throat, and the remaining hand pointed to the side. The giant Ant-Man and Deadpool followed the gesture and saw that on the fountain park, the hellfire wrapped in iron chains stood still. The green flames on its body were burning, and it was holding a badly damaged axe in its right hand, which was covered with scarlet blood, while its left hand was holding the other side of Eddie's body and dragging it on the ground. Its true form was the same as a demon. The hellfire's cold and ruthless gaze fell on the Ant-Man and Deadpool, and a chill gushed out of their backs. Even the strongest poison agent among them only lasted for a few minutes and was directly cut in half. The hellfire was so strong that it made them feel desperate. "I also know that I have to escape, but where should I escape to? This scene map is only so big." The giant Ant-Man smiled bitterly and looked at the countdown, and there were still 5 minutes left. We can't escape, so we can only bite the bullet. Poison Agent, you just held it back, and now it's our turn. Deadpool said while holding the 2 sodium-carbon steel swords on the ground tightly in his hands. That's right, you just lie here. The giant Ant-Man nodded in agreement. He bowed his head and said something, and then he put the seriously injured Eddie on the grass behind him. He took a deep breath, turned around and stood with his head held high, and stood side by side with Deadpool, one big and one small, facing the hellfire that was coming this way. Now, your opponent is us. I won't let you go one step further. The Ant-Man and Deadpool put down their harsh words, trying to provoke the hellfire, but the hellfire turned a blind eye to it. It ignored them, threw away the body in its left hand, and continued to walk towards them with the axe. It's useless, Eddie said with difficulty. He was helpless in his heart. The Ant-Man and the others still didn't know how strong the hellfire was. That's a real god-killing weapon. I'll take the lead, you look for the right time and give it a fatal blow. The giant Ant-Man whispered to Deadpool. No problem. Deadpool held the sharp double blades and was ready to sprint forward. In the next battle, who knows how many times his body will die. Then let's go. The giant Ant-Man took a step forward. He dragged his petrified right hand and clenched his left hand into a fist. With just a few steps, the Ant-Man was already dozens of meters away, right in front of the hellfire. Eat my punch. The giant Ant-Man roared and swung its left fist forward. This attack, which contained all its strength, caused a strong gust of wind to blow through the air, sending the flowers, grass, and gravel flying in all directions. It's stop. Ant-Man's fist, which was as large as a meteor, collided with Hellfire's left palm, which was burning with flames. In the next moment, the garden floor beneath Hellfire's feet caved in. Cracks spread out like a spider web, and countless gravel and dust were thrown into the air. However, no matter how much strength the giant Ant-Man exerted, its left fist could not be pushed down at all. Instead, it was being pushed up bit by bit. At the same time, he felt a burning pain coming from the tip of his fist. The green flame seemed to pass through his uniform and flesh, ignoring all defenses and directly burning his soul origin. Ah! Even though he was the one who initiated the attack, the giant Ant-Man let out a shrill cry instead. He was forced to pull back his left fist that was burning with unbearable pain and smashed his petrified right fist toward the hellfire. Hellfire raised the axe in his right hand. The old and damaged axe contained a tremendous force as it broke through the wind and immediately shattered the petrified right fist of the Ant-Man. They had only exchanged 2 moves. The giant Ant-Man clutched its right arm that was only left with half of its right arm, howling as it retreated in defeat. Just as Hellfire was about to continue its pursuit, 2 cold glints suddenly appeared from a blind spot behind it. One was aimed at the back of its neck, while the other was aimed at its lower body. Now is the time. Die for me. Deadpool gathered all his strength and faith in this sword attack. Hellfire had no intention of dodging or defending. It allowed the sodium-carbon steel sword to stab its seemingly weak spot. Clang. Clang. The tips of the 2 sodium-carbon steel swords fell on Hellfire's body. It was as if they had stabbed the hardest metal, making a crisp sound of metal clashing. It did not break through its defense. This was a desperate fact. Hellfire looked sideways with an expressionless face. His empty eyes were burning as he looked at Deadpool, whose smile was frozen on his face. Deadpool forced a smile and let go of the 2 swords in his hands. He greeted as if he was an acquaintance. Hellfire, right? Hello. Before he finished speaking, the axe in Hellfire's hand drew a horizontal arc and chopped off Deadpool's head. The headless corpse fell straight to the ground. Hellfire retracted its gaze from Deadpool's body and looked at the seriously injured giant Ant-Man and Poison Agent in front of it. It was lifting its front foot, but its back foot was held tightly by a pair of hands. Looking back, it saw Deadpool, who had just been beheaded, lying on the ground, holding one of Hellfire's big feet tightly, regardless of the scorched black hands. "I told you. As long as I am here, you won't be able to take another step forward. I forgot to tell you, I am one of the most annoying people." Deadpool smiled bitterly. The self-healing ability on his body continued to work, repairing the damaged body parts. The speed was one level faster than Wolverine Logan's self-healing. Hellfire seemed to be interested. It squatted down, grabbed Deadpool's neck with its empty right hand, and lifted him from the ground. "Looking at you from such a close distance, you are really ugly." Deadpool reluctantly opened his mouth. He was still teasing Hellfire as he looked at him face to face. Hellfire suddenly grinned and locked Deadpool's body with the chains wrapped around his body, and the green flames also covered it. "It's useless, even if I am burned to black charcoal, I can." Deadpool's words stopped abruptly. He was horrified to realize that the green flames not only peeled off his body layer by layer, but also gradually lost his self-healing ability in the burning. "No." Deadpool, who was soon burned to the bones, kept struggling in Hellfire's hands. "Damn it, I have to save him." The giant Ant-Man lying on the ground heard Deadpool's screams and struggled to get up from the ground, but his hands were seriously injured and he couldn't get up for a while. Eddie, who still had half of his body left, was wrapped in poison and barely maintained his life. He breathed hard and conveyed his thoughts with his mind. "Poison, I can only rely on you now. Only you can help Deadpool. If I leave your body, you will die immediately." Poison responded simply. "It doesn't matter. Hurry up, it will be too late to hesitate." "Then, as you wish." Countless black liquid lines separated from Eddie, crossed the giant Ant-Man, and shot at Deadpool in Hellfire's hands. Chapter 638. After the poison left the body, Eddie, who was just an ordinary human body, stopped breathing in less than half a second, and the remaining half of his body stopped all signs of life. On the other side, countless black liquid lines broke through the raging green flames and wrapped around Deadpool's skeleton, forming a layer of dark protective film outside the bones, trying to resist the burning of the green flames. Flames surged in the empty eye sockets, and Hellfire seemed to realize something. It used the iron chain to lock Deadpool's skeleton, and its palm squeezed Deadpool's skull until it made a cracking sound. The flames on its body intensified along the iron chain and palm, spreading towards the human skeleton covered with the dark protective film. It wanted to burn Deadpool together with the symbiotic poison. The skeleton of Deadpool continued to scream and struggle, and a second shrill scream faintly came from his body. "This is not an ordinary flame," Poison's voice rang wildly in Deadpool's mind. It was indeed immune to flames, but the green flames on Hellfire's body were derived from the eternal fire. Not to mention the body, even the soul and spirit were burned together. Under the burning of the green flames on Hellfire's body, the protective film formed by the poison on Deadpool's skeleton faded little by little, and the skin of the protective film evaporated into nothingness. Damn it! For the first time in its life, the symbiotic poison, who was immune to flames, tasted the feeling of being burned by fire. How to describe the feeling of being infinitely close to death? Hot, dry, and red, the water on the body gradually evaporated by the high temperature, and perhaps even a trace of the body could not be left. Death, real death, a death with nowhere to escape. But this feeling of despair and suffocation, why was it so familiar, as if it had experienced it once? The symbiotic poison couldn't help but think. Then, deep in its memory, something awakened under the stimulation of the flames. The box that had been sealed since he was born was finally opened. Poison clearly saw it. It was the scene of a chase in the chaotic sky. The top dome was a red wormhole vortex, surrounded by rotating tornadoes. It was in the cockpit of a large spaceship, and in front of it was another Eagle fighter. On the deck of the Eagle fighter, a man stood. It was Kale. He looked down at it coldly, and a destructive red flame surged in his hand. Slaughter. You are the evil product of the negative consciousness accumulated by me and Poison during World War II on Earth. He was my former comrade and also my inner demon. However, the Second World War on Earth ended long ago. Everything was either frozen or disappeared from this world forever. Kale's whisper reached his ears. Massacre? Who was Slaughter? Me? Poison's brain was shaking violently and being torn apart. So, farewell, Carnage. I hope you won't have anything to do with me in your next life. Just as Kale finished speaking, he pressed his palm downwards, and the scorching hot divine flames transformed into a pillar of fire that blasted towards it. No! Poison also cried out in despair. Just as the flame pillar was about to hit it, a thought involuntarily appeared in its mind. No, Master. Our battle and journey are not over yet. As long as there is a battle, you will always need me. Because when we are together, no one in this universe can be stronger than us. Toxin didn't know if that was Slaughter's thought before he died or if it was his own thought now. It only knew that in this moment of despair, it had finally found the meaning of existence it had been searching for. As it turned out, it was born from the divine flame. Just as the green flame was about to burn away the dark matter on Deadpool's bones, the dark matter turned into a crimson color, and in turn repelled the green flame. It matched the genes on Deadpool's body and quickly created tough dark red muscles, forming a brand new body in Hellfire's hands. A body formed by the combination of the undead Deadpool and the symbiotic Poison. Unlike the dark and tall body of the Poison agent, it was more similar to Spider-Man. It was strong and thin, and its muscles were no longer bloated and swollen. It was like a tough exoskeleton armor. Its eyes were dark red, as if there were flames burning, and it looked at Hellfire fiercely and domineeringly. The creature that was the symbiotic combination of Deadpool and Poison was simply described as Poison Attendant. Ignoring the burning of the green flame on its body and the iron chain that locked its bones, Poison Attendant suddenly grinned and reached out to hold Hellfire's fingers. Its fingers were forcibly pried open one by one. At the same time, Poison Attendant's feet stepped on Hellfire's chest, bent its legs, and as its body leaned back, it jumped back fiercely. Kacha! A hair-raising sound rang out. The iron chain connected to the dragon bone in Poison Attendant's body and the dragon bone itself both broke. After all, the iron chain was also a part of the body. This made Hellfire groan in pain. Poison Attendant looked at Hellfire faintly. It opened its mouth wide, and its sharp teeth bit the iron chain to pieces, swallowing it as food. Touching the big hole in its stomach, the dragon bone in Poison Attendant's body was healing at a speed visible to the naked eye. It looked at Hellfire and let out a sharp and ear-piercing roar. The roar formed a sound wave attack, blowing up countless gravel and flowers. Deadpool, you! The giant Ant-Man behind it looked at it in surprise, not knowing what had happened to Deadpool. But now, the anger on Deadpool's body was even more terrifying than rage. The murderous aura on its body was even stronger than Hellfire's. What kind of monster had been inadvertently created in this competition? Poison Attendant did not respond. It heard the cry and turned its head coldly. Its red eyes turned to the giant Ant-Man on the ground. It ignored Hellfire and rushed at him. Don't come over. The Ant-Man was really frightened. He only felt his vision blur and Poison Attendant was already in front of him. Then, several iron chains emitting green flames clanged. Like agile poisonous snakes, they wrapped around Poison Attendant's neck, waist, and 4 limbs. It was Hellfire who made a move in time. It used the iron chains on its body to lock Poison Attendant's body tightly and forcefully pulled it back. We're saved. The Ant-Man exhaled lightly. He really did not know how to describe this scene. Their teammates wanted to attack him, but in the end, they were saved by the other team. Hellfire pulled on the chains to restrict the Poison Attendant's movements. The poison attendant bared its fangs and brandished its claws in annoyance as it continued to charge in the direction of the ant people. It tightened the chains on its body to the maximum, and the powerful force even caused Hellfire to move forward, plowing out 2 deep marks under its feet. Roar! Poison attendant roared. The sharp and ear-piercing ultrasound directly stunned the Ant-Man in front of it. The chains on its body began to break one by one under the tug of the beast. At the critical moment, 2 translucent black shadows flew out from the 2 bodies of Rage and Pride, converging and rushing towards Hellfire. Chapter 639. After the 2 evil shadows entered the Hellfire's body, its originally huge body swelled up once again, turning into a 5-meter-tall giant. It transformed into black and green flames that wildly overflowed, burning the surrounding flower fields into ashes and nothingness. They were the 2 evil spirits, Wrath and Pride. Although Ketu, who possessed them, had died, they were immortal dimensional creatures. Other than a powerful seal, no one could completely kill them. With the power of the 2 evil spirits, not only did Hellfire's body grow bigger, its green flames turned black, and even its aura became more dark and evil. Hellfire was an evil creature, abomination, a brand new creature refined by the eternal fire. Its nature was between evil and light, and it was the neutral side of chaos. But after the 2 evil spirits were injected, it completely became evil to the extreme. Roar! Poison attendant's attention returned to Hellfire. It broke the chains that locked its body and stomped on the ground. Its short red body disappeared from the spot, leaving behind a white blast of air. The air in front of it exploded, creating a wave of dust. Poison attendant was like a human rocket, its head directly hitting evil Hellfire's chest. Boom! The powerful force even shattered the space around it. The evil Hellfire seemed to have moved horizontally as it retreated at an extremely fast speed. Its 2 feet plowed out 2 shockingly deep trenches on the ground until it penetrated through the entire fountain garden area. But evil Hellfire remained standing. It stared coldly at Poison Attendant. The black flames on its body burned fiercely, and the high temperature evaporated the water in the fountain. Even the statues and stone slabs began to melt into lava. Poison Attendant stood at one end of the fountain garden, and evil Hellfire stood at the other end. The 2 of them stared at each other, and the evil power and violent anger almost destroyed the garden. God, spare me! Is this a competition, or do you want to kill me? The giant ant-men who were watching the battle live and the audience outside the arena were so frightened that they were speechless. They held their breaths, not knowing how to end this. Poison Attendant and evil Hellfire, both of them were more dangerous than Hulk. They were terrifying existences that could destroy the world. For 2 of such existences to appear at the same time and fight, no one could stand it. If they knew that these 2 existences were closely related to Kale, how would they feel? It seemed that even this virtual map space was shaken by the confrontation between Poison Attendant and evil Hellfire. The sky and the ground at the edge of the garden began to gradually collapse. Poison Attendant and evil Hellfire moved. The next moment when they were about to collide, everything in the space suddenly froze. Poison Attendant, evil Hellfire, giant ant people, and Eddie's corpses disappeared from the battle map. Above the map that was on the verge of collapse, the countdown ended at 000000. It turned out that unknowingly, the 10-minute limit had quietly passed. Although the contestants and audience didn't know if the Poison Attendant or the evil Hellfire was stronger, they secretly heaved a sigh of relief. Their hearts couldn't take it. Are they sure that Earth's strongest enemy? And not from Earth? The countdown of the 4th match. Hellfire was the only contestant left in the red team, while Deadpool and Ant People were left in the blue team. Therefore, in this match, Deadpool, Ant People, and Poison Agent's team won. As 3 white lights appeared on the duel field, Poison Agent, who had returned to his human form, Eddie, Deadpool, and Ant People, returned to the duel field. Eddie looked around blankly. When he saw Deadpool and Ant People, he sighed softly and said, "I didn't expect that we would win in the end." "Don't mention it, I was scared just now." Ant People patted his chest with lingering fear and looked at Deadpool next to him. "Deadpool, what happened to you just now?" Deadpool smiled bitterly and shook his head. "Don't ask, actually, I don't know. I thought I was going to die. Later, it seemed that something was attached to me. I know a little, but I can't tell you the specific details." Eddie frowned. He tried to call Poison with his heart, but Poison didn't respond to him, as if he didn't want to talk about what happened just now. While Eddie and the other two were still talking, a white light lit up on the duel field, and Hellfire, holding a broken axe, returned to the duel field alone. Huh? Didn't their whole team get eliminated? Seeing Hellfire, Ant People subconsciously shrank his neck. After the battle just now, he is afraid that Hellfire will have a psychological shadow in his life. If he faces Hellfire again, he might as well give up. The other contestants were also depressed and puzzled. At this moment, the main god system gave an answer, because two members of the winning team forfeited in the third group match just now. Hellfire, who performed well in the fourth match, was given a promotion spot. There was an uproar in the audience, and most of the contestants' scalps were numb, but the strength of Hellfire was obvious to all, and he was indeed qualified to participate in the subsequent matches. Deadpool blinked in surprise. Wait, even if Hellfire is given a promotion spot, isn't there still a vacant position? As if confirming Deadpool's words, the main god system continued, the second vacant promotion spot will be replaced by the next contestant. Under the gaze of the contestants and the audience, a white light appeared on the duel field. The white light faded, and a silver-haired, golden-eyed young man could be seen. Time did not leave a trace on him, and his every move was filled with elegance and affinity. He seemed to be an ordinary young man. But everyone in the field knew him. No, it should be, no one on Earth did not know him. Wasn't this superpower competition created by him? That's right, it's me. Facing the contestants, Kale blinked, spread his hands, and said, "Seeing that you guys are so excited, I am also a little eager to give it a try, so I might as well go on stage earlier." Kale was telling the truth. After watching the battle between Poison Attendant and Evil Hellfire, his fighting spirit was indeed tempted. Since he already had plans to go on stage, it was not bad to go on stage earlier. Of course. I know that there are still a few remaining teams. In order to speed up the competition, how about this? Kale pointed to himself and said casually, "I will go up against the other teams. Whoever can touch my body or hold on for 30 seconds will be qualified to advance to the third round." If they continued to compete, it would probably take 2 to 3 days. Stop pretending, Kale was here to blow up the field. If he eliminated all the remaining contestants, wouldn't it speed up the pace of the competition? As soon as Kale's words came out, after a moment of silence, the audience burst into extremely fanatical cheers. It was said that the symbol of peace was the strongest on Earth, but that had always been a legend passed down from World War II. Many people did not know that peace symbolized true strength. Chapter 640. After the 4 team matches, there were only 4 teams left on the dueling arena that had yet to compete. That is, teams 4, 8, 9, and 12. Kale suddenly came out and wanted to fight against the remaining contestants, that is, the 12 people in these 4 teams. The rules were also very simple and easy to understand. They could attack, as long as they touched Kale himself; they could also defend, as long as they could last 30 seconds under Kale's hands. No matter how one looked at it, compared to the previous 4 matches, the contestants were better at killing each other. Moreover, the contestants who could enter the second round all had the means and strength to at least last 5 minutes under Kale's hands in World War II. Teams number 8 and number 9 were made up of trainers trained by the Carl family. Only teams number 4 and number 12 were made up of people with special abilities from all over the world. They also had a certain degree of arrogance, so no one raised any objections. The audience was also happy to see the rules changed at the last minute. Many people had come to watch the competition because of the symbol of peace, Kyle. Now that they could finally see Kyle in action, there was no need to say anything against it. Everyone agreed with the idea. Then, the fifth special match officially begins. The main god system announced the schedule in public. Kale and the members of the other 4 teams disappeared from the arena and were transferred to the virtual duel space. That man finally appeared. What do you think of this special match? Ant-Man looked at Eddie, wanting to know his opinion. Deadpool also looked at Eddie. I don't know much either. However, if you think that he is still at the same level of strength as before, then you are wrong. Eddie smiled and said, as far as I know, the family cow was already at the point of death. At that time, the family head was already terminally ill, and his condition was worse than during World War II. Since he left Earth in World War II and returned to New York, he had broken through the barrier of his strength and life. Until today. He is still improving and learning. So, let alone catching up, it is difficult to even look up to his back. Eddie shrugged in relief and patted Ant-Man and Deadpool on the shoulders. You may know later that his true strength is just the tip of the iceberg. The screen above the duel arena changed and showed a bustling modern city. In the middle of countless high-rise buildings, there was an open green square with a symbol of peace in the center. Random battle scene, New York Square. Red team, Kale. Blue team, teams 4, 8, 9, and 12. A total of 4 teams. No one was allowed to leave New York Square. As long as a member of the blue team bumped into Kale or lasted for 30 seconds, it would be considered an individual victory. After the rules were displayed above the virtual space, a 30-second countdown appeared above the virtual New York Square. The 12 contestants stood on one side and stared nervously at Kale, who was standing alone on the other side. The audience outside subconsciously held their breaths as they watched the big screen from God's perspective. Everyone was secretly anticipating what kind of fierce battle would break out next. This 1 versus 12 should be even more exciting than the previous 4 matches, right? Unfortunately, they were destined to be disappointed, the moment the countdown began, just as the 12 contestants were about to rush forward. Kale's originally calm body suddenly erupted with a burst of pressure. His eyes flashed with scorching flames. His tall body seemed to spontaneously combust as a faint layer of dazzling energy burned on the surface of his body. Double star form. A white wave of dust erupted on the spot as Kale soared into the sky and flew straight to the top of the dome, breaking through the atmosphere in the blink of an eye. The contestants in the square were dumbfounded as they looked up at Kale, who had turned into a speck of starlight. Although according to the system's rules, the sky above New York Square was indeed within the range of New York Square, how were they going to play? What was there to touch? It was harder than ascending to the sky. This height should be enough. Kale, in his double star form, broke through the atmosphere and stopped at the edge of Earth's space. If he flew any further, not to mention New York Square, even the range of Earth would be exceeded. Since it was an explosion, he had to do it cleanly. Among the remaining contestants, there were K2, who was carrying the other evil spirits of the 5 sins. If he was too careless, he might be easily touched by them. As the organizer of the superpower competition, of course, he had to be impartial. I can say. The real reason is that my body is now ready to move, so I'm looking for you guys to vent. Kale's lips curled into a smile. He really hadn't exercised his muscles for a long time. Now that he was in the virtual space, it was okay to warm up first. Under the astonished gaze of countless spectators outside, Kale, who was floating in the near-Earth orbit, held his right wrist with his left hand and used his right hand as a cannon. Then, a dazzling double-star energy condensed in his palm. What's that? The contestants in the virtual New York Square kept their heads up. In their field of vision, a little bit of dazzling starlight shone. The starlight was getting bigger and bigger as if it was falling to the square below. Run! Run! One of the K2 shouted in horror. Then, a double-star energy beam slammed down. The dazzling light beam was as thick as a wrist and 1 meter long. Like an intercontinental light arrow, it swept across tens of thousands of meters of space in an instant, and more than half of it sank into the concrete ground next to the feet of a contestant. It missed. The contestant's back was sweating as he looked at his feet. Only half of the light arrow was left exposed. As soon as his voice fell, the light arrow immediately turned into a bright white light, and a powerful explosive shock wave blasted the contestant away. It did miss. Unfortunately, this light cannon was an area attack, so it was useless to dodge it. And this was just the beginning of everything. Next. The continuous light cannon bombardment was like a storm, continuing to indiscriminately bombard the virtual New York Square. Until 30 seconds after the countdown ended. Yes. The hundreds of millions of spectators outside and on the Skynet platform felt their scalps go numb as they watched this one-sided bombardment baptism that was like a movie's special effects, like a natural divine punishment. This game was not exciting, and it was even a little cruel. After watching the whole game, the spectators only felt one thing: the times had really changed. Kale, who no longer used a sword to slash people, switched to an intercontinental light cannon. Who could withstand this? The countdown ended, and the virtual New York Square had become a deep hole in the ground. In the hole, there were contestants who really lasted through the hellish 30 seconds. They were the 4 K2 codenamed Greed, Gluttony, Envy, and Lust. With the evil spirits protecting their bodies, they barely held on until the last moment. Not bad. Chapter 641. The second round of the competition is now over. The contestants who have advanced to the third round are the 16 contestants standing on the duel arena. Under the announcement of the main god system as the referee, the audience looked at the duel arena. There were originally hundreds of contestants, but after 2 rounds of cruel competition, only 16 people, including Kale, were left. If the first 2 rounds were for elimination, then the third round onwards would be the highlight of the superpower competition. It was a competition of true strength. Who could compete for the top 8 or even the top 3 among the various Arcanists and Supermen, however? These were not important to Kale. Up until now, his initial goal had already been achieved. Next, he just needed to fight as he pleased. Just treat it as a practical exercise before the battle with the alien forces in the future. Kale smiled. He stood on the duel arena, his eyes briefly meeting with Alpha Centauri. Both of them obviously knew that no matter what, they would have to fight today sooner or later. This battle. Perhaps it should have started long ago during World War II. Unfortunately, it dragged on for nearly a century. In the beginning, Kale tried his best to avoid Alpha Centauri. Later, Alpha Centauri had been avoiding Kale. The symbol of peace protecting Earth on the surface and the Supreme Sorcerer protecting Earth in the dark seemed to have tacitly agreed to continue this long overdue battle. Until now. Then. Next, the third round of the competition will begin. The 16 contestants will fight one-on-one to compete for the top 8. As soon as the main god system announced the third round of the competition, the audience burst into wild cheers. Today's first half of the competition had subverted their understanding countless times. And further down, they might witness a real battle between the gods. Sure enough. Listening to nearly half of the audience shouting his name, Kale looked around the arena and shook his head helplessly. He secretly sighed in his heart. I still don't like standing in the center of attention. Wasn't it good to be the mastermind behind the scenes? With a thought, he could set the rules and change the universe. Kale's mentality was too old now. He was not as hot-blooded as before during World War II. Facing such a hot-blooded scene now, he was really not used to it. This superpower tournament for Earth's civilization might be more suitable for Superman's clone. If it were him, he might have just relied on his fists to sweep through. At this moment, Kale still did not know that Superman's clone Caesar had already subdued a god-level servant. Everything that could be done through words would not be done through violence. Of course. Caesar's clone was not due to his aging mentality. This time, it wasn't just the spectator stands outside. Even the arena was in an uproar. The main god system would also randomly select who would fight who. Kale did not expect it to be his turn so soon. However, this was not bad. Kale looked at Illusion, whose back was facing him. He could use this competition to find out why Illusion had lost control earlier. Boss, do your best. Kale, be careful. Family head, do your best. Lucy, Yutong, and Wanda, who had formed a team earlier, all cheered for Kale. Wanda was pulled by Lucy. Her gentle face was a little shy. Kale nodded. Then, together with Illusion, the two disappeared from the arena. The scene changed. Kale opened his eyes and found himself in the middle of a magnificent golden palace. Under his feet was a vast and solid golden square. The floor around him extended to the end of his vision. Even further away, he could vaguely see the Rainbow Bridge and Star Lake flowing with colorful energy. Heavenly Palace? Kale mumbled to himself. He looked forward and saw Illusion, who was floating at a low altitude 20 meters away. The virtual space created by the main god system was mostly based on his memory. It was then perfected by the second construct technology. Therefore, this place was exactly the same as the Heavenly Palace in his memory. As if to confirm Kale's guess, the main god system's explanation appeared in the sky. Random battle map, Divine Realm's Heavenly Palace. The time limit is half an hour. There are no rules or restrictions. The battle will only end when one side kills the other or surrenders first. They just bombed New York Square. Now, they're using the Heavenly Palace as a simulated battlefield. The main god must be doing this on purpose. Kale exhaled softly. He threw away all distracting thoughts and looked at Illusion in front of him. Illusion seemed to be free from the restraints of gravity. He floated half a meter in the air. The golden cape on his shoulders swayed without any wind. His lifeless eyes stared at the stars above Kale's head. Kale felt that something was wrong. Ever since Illusion Vision was born, it would always think deeply before doing anything and make logical and rational decisions. He said, Illusion. Although we're not master and servant, and I have no right to blame you for what you did, shouldn't you explain why you killed Natasha and Quicksilver? Before Kyle could finish his sentence, the Illusion Vision suddenly disappeared from the spot. In the blink of an eye, Illusion flew in front of the defenseless Kale. His hands, which were made of vibranium and painted with special silver, slammed into Kale's chest with dozens of tons of superhuman force. As if he had a rocket launcher on his back, Illusion pushed Kale off the ground. He swept across the square without slowing down and slammed into the noble and sacred Golden Palace behind him. The battle came too suddenly. He was caught off guard. Boom! Illusion pushed Kale into a Golden Palace at an extremely fast speed. They flew out from the other side of the palace and continued to crash into more palaces and houses behind them. The immortal palace made of gold was as fragile as paper to Illusion and Kale's physique. Boom! 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 The two of them crashed through countless palaces and houses in the divine domain until the Illusion Vision came to a sudden stop in the air. Kyle continued to crash into the Rainbow Bridge at the bottom of the Rainbow Bridge behind him with great inertia. A few shocking cracks immediately appeared on the Rainbow Bridge. Illusion, are you serious? Kale stood up from the ground. He ignored the torn clothes on his body and saw Illusion stop in the air. He reached out and summoned something to the palace behind him. That's right. The virtual space here was the immortal palace of the divine realm. Naturally, there was such an item. It followed Kale's thoughts. A small silver hammer flew out of the immortal palace like a meteor and landed in Illusion's hand. Crackling electric light lingered around the body of vibranium. Pressure filled the air. Chapter 642. In the immortal palace of the virtual divine dominion, above the rainbow bridge, Huanshi floated in the air like a god. He held the Thor's hammer tightly. The fusion energy in his body merged perfectly with the thunder power in the Thor's hammer, causing a powerful pressure to push the air outwards, forming a cyclone and wind. The clear star lake under the rainbow bridge had waves on its surface. Huanshi. I don't know what happened to you. Kale looked up at Huanshi and made up his mind. Since you want to fight, then let's fight. Anyway, this is a competition. If I don't fight with you, it will seem a little pretentious. He casually took out a card. The picture on the card was a ball of black liquid. It had been a long time. Venom card. Kale summoned Venom. With a slight squeeze of his right hand, Venom, which looked like a black water ball, immediately merged into his body through his palm. Master, you finally remembered me. Venom's slightly resentful voice sounded in his mind. The main thing is that my clothes are torn. Kale pointed at his clothes very straightforwardly. Due to Huanshi's sudden attack, although his superhuman physique had withstood the previous round of attacks, his casual clothes were severely torn. It hung on his body like a piece of rags, revealing his strong bronze abdominal muscles. Venom, its function was only equivalent to clothes that could infinitely self-repair. However, to be able to tear his master's clothes, this proved that he had indeed met a difficult opponent. This is the divine dominion? Then I'll take this set. Venom muttered in his heart. With a series of transformations, a white cloak with flame patterns replaced the torn casual clothes on Kale's body. Not bad. Kale nodded. He closed his eyes. When he opened them again, his eyes were already burning with a bright flame. Dazzling flames emerged from the surface of his body. The dual star energy, which was also derived from the origin stone, lingered around Kale's body. Even his hair was burning with energy. The pressure on Kale's body shook the surrounding space. The star lake at the bottom glowed with bigger waves. Sorry to keep you waiting. Kale looked at the sky in front of him, but Illusion suddenly turned around and flew back toward the heavenly palace like a bullet. He was stunned. What the hell is going on? Kale stepped onto the rainbow bridge and chased after Illusion like a meteor. What the hell? When the audience outside saw this scene, they scratched their heads in confusion. At this moment, in downtown New York, in a bustling fashion square. On the huge advertising screens in the skyscrapers, the superpower competition in the arena was being broadcasted, and all the places were temporarily closed for business. Almost all the passers-by on the street stopped in their tracks to watch this competition that was like special effects in a movie. Two white-haired old men sat on two stone chairs by the side of the plaza, calmly watching the chase between Kale and Illusion. One of the old men wore a black gold eye patch on his left eye, leaving only one eye that seemed to be able to see through everything. His slightly curly white hair fell to his shoulders, and his body was slightly bloated. He held a wooden walking stick in his left hand and coughed lightly from time to time. The other old man's face was square and clean. One could see that he was handsome when he was young, and there was a sense of righteousness between his eyebrows. His body was slightly thin, and his body was full of the scars of time. However, his back was very straight, as if he was a veteran. On the big screen, Illusion and Kale, one in front and one behind, chased after each other. They entered the heavenly palace of the divine realm and headed toward the underground treasure vault. The primer left by the past has been activated. A page that has been sealed in time is about to be opened, the one-eyed old man said calmly. Elder Fangzheng sighed helplessly. After Kale gets the clue, the final battle is coming. You and I both know what kind of future he will have. The one-eyed old man was silent for a moment before he finally said, "This is his destiny and the inevitable trend of history." History. History. Elder Fangjing looked up at the sky and couldn't help but say, "I don't want him to fall into that tragic and dark future, even if," boom. A thunderclap drowned out Elder Fangjing's voice. The sky above New York City turned from sunny to gloomy. Cold wind whistled through the streets. The weather was changing. You and I are now outsiders to this world and this universe. We can't change anything. The one-eyed old man stood up with the help of his walking stick. He looked at Elder Fangjing one last time. "See you again." "No, let's not meet again. I'm about to die. You have to live for a few more years until you see the ending of this story." The one-eyed old man disappeared at the corner of the busy street with the pedestrians who were trying to get out of the rain. "Yes, I want to see the ending of this world again." Elder Fangjing's face was filled with bitterness. He stood up and walked in the opposite direction of the one-eyed old man. Inside the virtual heavenly palace of the divine realm, Kale, who was in his dual star form, sped up and rushed through the dark underground corridor. He caught up with Illusion, who was flying in front of him. Kale pressed his hands on Illusion's shoulders and brought him down. They crashed into the huge door at the end of the corridor. Boom! The door fell down. Kale and Illusion fell from the sky and continued to roll forward into the room. He pressed Illusion to the ground with so much force that the surface of the vibrating golden body caved in slightly. Illusion couldn't escape no matter how hard he struggled. At that moment, 2 rows of faint blue flames lit up on both sides of the room. Kale noticed this. He scanned the large room and saw the familiar blue candles on both sides as well as the items in the room. This is Odin's treasury? How could he remember wrongly? Not long after he became a god, he accidentally came to the divine realm and met Odin. He was allowed to enter the treasury as a guardian of the divine realm to choose an item. He looked at it and finally chose the eternal fire. "Why did you bring me here?" Kyle frowned and looked down at the illusion that was pressed under him. He didn't think that hallucination had brought him to this hidden underground treasury by accident. But how did Illusion know about this place? Was it because of Vice? Before Kale could figure it out, Illusion realized that he couldn't escape. He swung his right hand back and used Thor's hammer to hit Kale's back, sending him flying. His body flew in a parabola and Kale crashed into the wall deep inside the treasury. There was a mural of Odin holding the eternal spear and riding a heavenly horse to conquer the 9 worlds. "Illusion, I'm really angry." Kyle sank into the wall of the mural. The energy of the 2 stars on his body erupted, shattering the wall that trapped his body. But after the wall of Odin's mural shattered, a completely different mural was revealed behind the wall. The hidden mural was much simpler. There was only a luxurious crown surrounded by 7 different colored gems. There was a sentence carved below the mural. "This Marvel world is fake." Chapter 643. This Marvel world is fake? The moment he saw the engraved words, Kale was shocked. His golden eyes, which had always been calm, showed a look of disbelief at this time. In a short moment, thousands of thoughts flashed through his mind at lightning speed. If other people saw this mural and engraved words, they would think that someone was joking. But he was different. He came from another world, and he clearly knew that this was originally a world derived from heroic movies. That was why this sentence had such a great shock to him. Because this world was indeed fake. No. This world was absolutely real. It couldn't be any more real. Even just thinking about it, Kale still clearly remembered that he started from the U.S. military recruit camp in World War II. He began to fight as a recruit until he became a major general and was on par with the gods. Now, he surpassed the Protoss and walked step by step towards the evolution of the universe's creatures. Every life and death battle was real. There was also Lucy, Yutong, Steve, Howard, Tawny, and so on that he knew. They were all flesh and blood and had their own independent thoughts. These were definitely not fake. If he admitted that this world was fake, then all the efforts he had made so far, the feelings he had experienced, the love and hate, and the anger he felt would be completely null and void. While repeatedly thinking about and questioning this sentence, Kale thought of other things. The strange murals hidden behind the wall of Odin's treasure house, were they part of Odin's treasure house itself, or was it a code flaw created by the Lord God system when it simulated the creation of this simulation space? In addition, up until now, was the illusion unintentional or intentional? It brought him into the virtual Odin's treasure house, bumped into this wall, and let him see the hidden murals behind the wall. Also, the most important point, which was also the point that made Kyle the most bewildered. That was the name Marvel. This was a secret that only he knew. Kale certainly knew that this was the world of Marvel, but the people in this world couldn't know the meaning of the word Marvel. There was no such word. He was very sure that since he crossed over, he had never revealed the name Marvel. Then who was it that could leave such a hidden mural here in the virtual space and let the illusion lead him here? It was as if there was an invisible hand manipulating everything in the dark. The owner of the big hand knew that this was the world of Marvel, knew that he was a transmigrator, and even knew about the existence of the card draw system. If there really was such a person, the most likely person would be himself and Superman's avatar, Caesar. All of the above thoughts were a small part of Kale's mind when he saw the mural. His brain had long surpassed that of humans and was comparable to a supercomputer. He instinctively made deductions about the murals that touched his mind. How is this possible? In the end, Kyle muttered to himself. His right hand subconsciously clenched into a fist, and the dazzling energy of the two stars condensed in his hand. With a single punch, he shattered the strange hidden mural in front of him. A small stone engraved with the word "fake" rolled to his feet. Kale didn't know why, but he couldn't help but feel fear. He didn't want the audience outside to see the picture and words on the hidden mural. Even if this world of Marvel was fake, and even people at his level couldn't detect it, then this world was perfect for others. The audience outside didn't see the picture and words on the mural. They only saw Kale being sent flying by the illusion and hitting the wall deep in the treasury. Then, Kale broke free from the wall, looked at the inner wall, and then smashed the wall again with his fist. Although they didn't understand why Kale smashed the mural a second time, no one would delve into it. They only hoped that this battle would be more exciting. In the virtual Odin treasury. What do you know? Kale looked back coldly and stared at the illusion who got up from the ground. His eyes were covered by flames, and no one could see his strangeness. They only knew that he was extremely angry now. Kale was indeed angry. He didn't like the feeling of losing control, and he didn't like the feeling of his fate being controlled by others. Since the use of the card draw system in World War II, Kale felt this feeling of disgust again. Illusion didn't respond. His eyes were still lifeless. He raised Mjolnir, which was glowing with electricity, and flew towards Kyle. Illusion. Answer me. Kale shouted angrily. The energy of the two stars flowed wildly on the surface of his body like thunder and lightning. Venom, who was symbiotic with it, was shocked to find that it had completely lost control of its symbiotic body, and all the power in its body had been transferred. It knew very well that Kale was really angry. He hadn't been angry like this for a long time. Boom! When the intertwined Thor hammer and the fist covered in energy flames collided, the two powerful energies seemed to have a chemical reaction. The sealed Odin treasury was like a huge balloon that was burst by the internal energy explosion. The entire golden immortal palace was shaking violently, on the verge of collapse. The ceiling of the celestial palace was forcefully broken open, and a stream of light that was burning to the brightest carried another figure and flew toward the outer space above the divine realm. Tell me. Kale grabbed the illusion's neck with one hand and flew him into the sky. The cape on the illusion's shoulders fluttered. He looked at Kale calmly and released the Thor hammer in his hand little by little. Thor hammer lost control and fell towards the palace under the pull of gravity. Vision's throat was squeezed so tightly that he couldn't breathe. He kept looking at Kyle until his eyelids started to droop. At the same time, the yellow gem on his forehead lit up like never before. So it's you, Mind Origin Stone. Kyle abruptly stopped in the air, maintaining his grip on the illusion. He stared at the Origin Stone on the other party's forehead. As if following his thoughts, the light from the stone became brighter and brighter until the light in front of him was reflected in his heart. Kale was stunned. He saw a huge star map in his heart. No, it should be said that it was bigger, more complicated, and more unpredictable than the universe. Maybe, the Marvel world he was in was just a corner of the map. Kale suddenly understood. Then, in the huge star map, there were two light spots that attracted him. Those were two coordinates. Who left two spacetime coordinates in the original Mind Stone? Kale was shocked. Although he didn't understand, he still remembered the two coordinates. Then, he heard a voice from the outside world faintly. Illusion Vision has lost. Kyle is the winner of this superhuman competition. Chapter 644. The vision in front of him blurred. Kale was still in a daze when the illusion in his hand disappeared. He returned to the arena surrounded by the audience. Kale? Are you okay? Lucy placed her hand in front of him and shook it back and forth. Kale woke up from the star map. He looked up in a daze and saw Lucy, Yutong, and Wanda looking at him worriedly. Only those who knew Kale well would know that he had lost his usual calmness and sense of propriety in the battle just now. It's nothing. Kale shook his head and said, I'll be back later. After secretly giving the main god system an order, his body disappeared from the arena. This scene also caused the audience and contestants to be confused. However, the second round had already begun. The second round of the competition is Poison Agent, Doctor Strange. The focus of the audience was on Doctor Strange, who was wearing a magic cape, and Eddie, who had returned to his human appearance. Eddie was shocked. He did not want it to be his turn so soon. After the battle with Hellfire, he had completely lost contact with the poison in his body. In the main hall of the Watchtower. Seeing that Kale had returned, Logan immediately put out his cigarette and stood up from the sofa. He asked curiously, Master, what happened just now? Don't ask. I'm not sure either. However, I'll find out. Kale took a deep breath and said with certainty. He thought for a moment, looked at the central console, and snapped his fingers. Main God. When I was fighting with the illusion, did you modify the basic code of the Divine Palace in the virtual space? No. The main God system quickly replied, everything in the virtual space is done through real scene scanning, or the system is created based on basic logic. It has not undergone any second modification. Kale pondered for a moment and continued to ask, then, when I was fighting, was the virtual space modified by anyone? This time. The main God system did not give an answer immediately. On the console's flat screen, a series of calculation codes flashed past extremely quickly. Finally, the main God system replied, there was no external system intrusion, but there is a possibility that someone in the virtual space modified the code. It's just that the illusion has the ability to modify the system code. Kale touched his chin. He already understood that this was most likely caused by the illusion. Including the crown and the 7 infinite origin stones on the mural, as well as the inexplicable words. But how did the illusion know this? Could it be that one day in the past, he accidentally revealed the word Marvel to the artificial intelligence vice that he carried with him? What was even more intriguing was the meaning of the star map at the end of the spirit gem and the 2 spacetime coordinates that it showed him. If the illusion, then of the stone, who is controlling it? Kale frowned. He suddenly realized that the more he understood, the more fog covered the truth. It was as if there was a hand hiding in the dark that arranged all of this. Using the stone, through the illusion, he finally saw the mural and gave him two coordinates that he did not know the meaning of. Was this kindness or malice? Kale calmed down and thought carefully. Who had the stone passed through? At the beginning, the stone was held by Thanos and the others. Later, it was given to Loki as a staff. Loki was defeated in the battle in New York, and the staff fell into the hands of the Avengers. At that time, Superman's avatar, Caesar, who was still on Earth, swallowed the stone and then seemed to have lent it to someone from the future. Superman's avatar also disappeared in the process of borrowing the stone. Later, the stone was suspected to have been brought back by someone from the future and given to Yutong. It had been kept by Yutong until it was used as material to create the illusion. There are too many people who have passed through it. Kale smiled bitterly. This stone was almost as good as the Space Origin stone. It had changed hands so many times in just a few years. However, if he had to find out who was most likely to leave a trick in the stone, it would probably be those people from the future. After all, Thanos was a straightforward person. He was bent on the plan to limit the population of the universe. It was impossible for him to do these superfluous things. As for Loki, although he was called the god of Arcane, he was actually a brainless man. It was even more impossible for him to do these complicated things. Kale could speculate that a hero from the future would come back here and borrow the Infinite Stone. After all, he was also a man who had read the script of The Avengers 4. Could it be me? In the future, leaving these things on the stone to warn me in the present time and space? There were too few clues and Kale could only think of it this way for the time being. But after thinking about it, he still couldn't figure out the meaning of these two time and space coordinates. Even if he knew the meaning, he had the coordinates now and no machine to travel through time and space. It was still a waste of effort. Kale sat down on the sofa a little dejectedly. He could only memorize the information of the two time and space coordinates. Perhaps it wasn't the time to use this information. Kale's gaze returned to the virtual screen and found that the winner of the match between the Poison Agent and Doctor Strange had been decided, so fast. Kale was stunned for a moment. When he saw that the winner was Doctor Strange, he was so surprised that he was speechless. When did Doctor Strange become so strong? He defeated the Poison Agent without even looking. Seeing Kale's confusion, Logan smiled bitterly and said, "Master, you didn't see it just now, right? The Poison Agent." Eddie couldn't enter the symbiotic combat form at all. He shouted "Poison" on the virtual battlefield for a long time before he was defeated by Doctor Strange with a whip. There's such a thing? Kale's serious and solemn face relaxed because of this episode. There were too many accidents today, in the duel arena. Doctor Strange returned to the stage with a dumbfounded expression. He originally came with Alpha Centauri to make up the numbers. He didn't expect that after winning in the team mode, he would encounter an opponent who couldn't transform and enter the top 8 just like that. The surrounding audience also looked at each other. It was really a crushing battle just now. They saw Eddie mumbling to himself the entire time before he was sent flying by Doctor Strange's whip. Mo pouted and said, "I don't know what happened to the parasite in the opponent's body. He won purely by luck." Alpha Centauri glanced at Mo, then looked at Doctor Strange and said softly, "Luck is also a kind of strength." The superpower competition continued to determine the top 8, but some people's minds were no longer on the competition. Chapter 645. Kale didn't watch the rest of the matches for the top 8 anymore. Because his heart was already in a mess, his thoughts were not on this match at all. From his point of view, today's matches were just small skirmishes. They were part of Earth's civil war. However, the battle with illusion had given him too much of an impact. Kale asked the main god system to maintain the rest of the matches and asked Logan to inform him before the top 4 matches. Then, he left the watchtower alone. Without changing into his spacesuit, Kale entered his dual star mode. He wrapped his body with flame energy and flew out of the watchtower's hatch. He arrived at the top of the watchtower that was floating near Earth's space. Kyle sat on the cold throne at the top of the watchtower, looking down at the blue Earth below. Then, he raised his eyes and stared at the empty and silent space. The twinkling stars formed a corner of the starry sky map in his mind. Just like that, an unknown amount of time passed. Kale injected part of his dual star's energy into the watchtower. Through the watchtower's scanning device, he began to search for Illusion's current location. After losing the duel, it should still be in the Cal country. However, Kale first scanned the Cal country and didn't find any trace of Illusion. He increased the power of the program and expanded the scanning range to the Atlantic Ocean, nothing. He scanned the entire hemisphere, still nothing. Kale couldn't help but frown. If Illusion blocked himself and cut off all signals, even the watchtower's powerful scanning device wouldn't be able to find him. He injected more dual star's energy into the throne. His body was surrounded by colorful flames. He was like a huge energy field, injecting vigorous energy into the watchtower and allowing it to operate at full capacity. The antennas at the bottom of the watchtower intertwined into a grid. A light wave that couldn't be seen by the naked eye covered the entire Earth like a ripple. Kyle's eyes flashed with a strange light. He had discovered the location of the Illusion, but the location of the other party. Without thinking too much, Kyle left the throne at the top of the tower and flew at top speed. His body turned into a meteor, crossing the Atlantic Ocean's sky and flying towards the African plate in the interior of the Earth. Africa, in a remote and uninhabited wilderness. This used to be a secret research institute of the local African country. After the invasion of Ultron with the Iron Army, this place was completely abandoned. After a few months, the surface was already covered with weeds. There was a large hole on the surface covered by weeds. Light shone in from the hole, illuminating the interior of the underground research lab. On a collapsed experiment table below, a tall man wearing a tight uniform and a golden cloak sat alone on the desolate and abandoned experiment table. He buried his forehead between his knees, and clasped his hands around his silver-painted head. A bright flowing light descended from the sky and entered the hole. Its speed drastically decreased before it came to a stop. The strong wind blew the gravel and dust in the basement into the surroundings. After of the view of the worlds of the world, illusion of the world, illusion of the world, illusion of the worlds of the world. T's illusion of the world, of the world of the world. Of the world of the world of the world is. Because I have nowhere else to go. Hallucination raised his head and looked around blankly. This is the place where you created me, he said in a low voice. If possible, I'd rather not be created by you. Kale shook his head. What you did today was not your intention. Thinking back to what he had done, Huansher's body couldn't help but tremble, and he felt an indescribable pain. But I was the one who did it. Although it was only in the virtual space, I still took the lives of my companions and trampled on their bodies. At that time, you were still conscious? Kyle wanted to know more details, hoping to find out the missing clues. Illusionary vision clutched his head and pointed a finger at the heart stone on his forehead. Instead of saying I'm awake, it's more accurate to say that my consciousness has been forcibly stripped away like I'm trapped inside this stone. Then, my body is controlled by a thought, and I can only watch as I lose control. Kale thought for a moment before asking, did you see the star map and the 2 spacetime coordinates? Illusion nodded. I saw it, but I've never seen it before. I don't know what it means. Silence. The two fell into a long silence. In the end, Kale broke the silence. It seems that someone did something to this mind stone a long time ago. Illusion clenched his fists and said bitterly, I hate this feeling, the feeling of being controlled, losing my mind, and attacking the people I love. So, I made a choice here. What choice? Kale guessed something. I want to remove this stone from my forehead. Illusion pointed at the mind stone on his forehead. As if sensing his thoughts, the mind stone glowed with a strange yellow light. Kale frowned. You should know. It's that stone that gave you a new life and consciousness. It's a part of your soul. If you remove it, you'll probably die. I know, but if I don't get rid of this stone, I'll be its slave for the rest of my life. Illusion's eyes were filled with pain. He punched the experiment table he was sitting on, and spiderweb-like cracks appeared on the table. Since you've made your choice, I'll take care of it. Kale took a deep breath. He knew that if there was a place where he could be sure to remove the stone from Illusion's forehead, it would probably be that place, the place with the most advanced technology on Earth. But I'll have to wait until the end of this competition. If I don't get first place, I'll have to give the stone away. Kale smiled helplessly. This was a hole he dug for himself, and he needed some time to fill it. There's no need to rush. Illusion nodded. Kale and Illusion returned to the watchtower. When they returned to the main hall, the competition in the cow country had just finished with the top 8 contestants. Other than Kale and Dr. Bizarre, the remaining 6 contestants were Alpha Centauri, Yutong, Wanda, Hellfire, Deadpool, and Gluttony. Gluttony was one of the top evil spirits of the 7 sins. Kale was not surprised that K2, who possessed it, made it to the top 8. Lucy was eliminated. Kale was surprised. Logan smiled. Yes. My mother met Wanda and surrendered. She said that she wanted to give the young people more opportunities to train. She's probably tired and wants to rest early. Kale smiled. The last few contestants did not particularly surprise him. However, from the beginning until now, the only one he saw as an opponent was Alpha Centauri. As Kale was thinking about this, the main god system's mechanical voice sounded in his ear. The competition for the top 4 has officially begun. The first round, Ancient won against Yutong. Chapter 646. The first match of the quarterfinals was Alpha Centauri vs Yutong. Random battle location, SHELD, headquarters rooftop. It was located in New York City, but it was isolated from the bustling city. On one side of the wall was a logo that resembled the letter A. This was SHELD headquarters. It was hundreds of meters above the ground, and there was a helicopter parking spot on the rooftop. The 2 women stood on each side of the rooftop, facing each other. The 2 were in a state of competition and confrontation, but neither of them emitted a murderous aura. They didn't even have a competitive spirit. They were still calm and indifferent, like passers-by on the side of the road. The cool and elegant Yutong wore a cool long dress. Her black dress fluttered in the wind, like a black rose in its prime. The cold and indifferent Alpha Centauri wore a simple robe and stood on the edge of the rooftop with her hands behind her back. She was like a green lotus that couldn't blend into this world. The 2 women had completely different appearances and temperaments, but when they stood together, they gave people the illusion that they were very similar. This was because Alpha Centauri and Yutong were indeed similar. After hundreds of years, Alpha Centauri decided to protect Earth from the fate of being swallowed by the dark dimension. Therefore, her actions would not change according to her own intentions. Everything she did, every step she took, whether it was right or wrong, was just to protect Earth. Yutong was given a new life and meaning by Kale. Since she was a child, she had decided to be Kale's sword. Therefore, she didn't have her own intentions. As long as it was beneficial to Kale, she would do it. As long as it was harmful to Kale, she would eliminate and eradicate it. Purity and single-mindedness. This was the similarity between Alpha Centauri and Yutong. This purity and single-mindedness made them stronger than anyone else when they fought. This was also one of the points that Kale found interesting after seeing the two of them face off. On the rooftop of SHELD building. Do you want to go first, or should I? Alpha Centauri asked softly. I'll go first. I know that you are very powerful, and you are an existence that can threaten my boss. Once you make a move, I might not be able to resist at all. Yutong was very self-aware. Moreover, this battle wasn't for her boss. She didn't have any desire to win. However, she still wanted to give it a try. Since many years ago, her strength had completely stagnated. It was as if she had fallen into a bottleneck and was unable to improve further. The main reason for this was because of genes and abilities. One must know that Yutong had been fighting until now with her rare blue-grade ability. She was still invincible against anyone other than Kale. Fighting with the mysterious and powerful Alpha Centauri might give him an opportunity to break through. When Yutong thought of this, her eyes glowed silver. Her feet left the ground and she floated half a meter above the rooftop. This is my strongest move. If you can break it, I'll admit defeat. When Yutong said this, her beautiful silver eyes glowed brightly. Her long black hair and long skirt fluttered without any wind. Instead, the surrounding space seemed to be frozen. Faint silver ripples spread out with her as the center until it covered the entire rooftop. It sealed the dust, light, and even the air inside. Alpha Centauri was also completely sealed. It looked at Yutong motionlessly. What is that? Countless spectators outside widened their eyes. They looked at the miraculous scene on the screen in disbelief. Yutong was like a god in the corner of the world on the rooftop. She controlled and sealed everything inside. Time halt? Or space freeze? Logan in the watchtower was shocked. He did not expect that the little lowly from before had far surpassed him and reached a height that he could only look up to. No, there is no concept of time and space. Staring at Yutong on the screen, Illusory Vision shook his head and looked at Kyle who was beside him. That is a domain. Yutong's mind domain can only be achieved by using one's mind to the limit. Kale sighed. It seemed that even time and space were frozen. In fact, everything on the rooftop was subtly controlled by one's mind, causing the outside world to see the visual effect of time and space being frozen. It was just that when everything except time and space were sealed, it was no different from time and space being frozen. Even if a real god came, he would probably be trapped. In Yutong's mind domain, Alpha Centauri on the rooftop could not move. It stood in place like a human sculpture. In the duel arena, Doctor Strange looked up anxiously and looked at Alpha Centauri in the virtual space. He knew very well that spells not only relied on the mind, but also the body's movements, including hand seals and chanting. Now that Alpha Centauri could not move, it could not use strange spells to fight back. Unless it could use its mind alone to cast spells, but that was impossible. Just as Doctor Strange thought of this, he saw a blurry white figure on the dual screen. It broke free from Alpha Centauri and slowly floated towards Yutong in front of it. It was the soul of the Ancient One. In the mind domain, Alpha Centauri's soul flew lightly to Yutong as if it was taking a stroll in the back garden. Looking at Yutong, who was glowing with silver light and emitting an oppressive aura, Alpha Centauri's soul shook its head gently and whispered, "Since your body limits your strength, why don't you just give up on your body?" The body and the soul are equally important to humans, but due to subjective perception, people usually pay more attention to the body. This is the stubbornness and weakness of the mind. Alpha Centauri's soul pushed out a palm and landed on Yutong's forehead. In the next moment, a ball of light flew out from behind Yutong. It was Yutong's soul. But even if it was a soul, it was still shining with a dazzling silver light. What's going on? Most of the audience outside could not understand what happened in the virtual space. Then, the match ended abruptly. Yutong concedes defeat. Ancient One wins and advances to the semi-finals. It was not until the main god system's prompt sounded and the Ancient One returned to the duel that the audience realized that the Ancient One had won in the end. That woman is too scary. Logan sighed in the watchtower. Just a moment ago, he thought that Yutong had a chance of winning, but in the next moment, Alpha Centauri easily won the match. That was the Sorcerer Supreme who had protected Earth for hundreds of years. Kale smiled indifferently. If Alpha Centauri was not strong, it would be hard to say if Earth could survive until now in the face of the evil forces of the multidimensional and extraterrestrial worlds. However, no matter how strong a person was, there would be a day when they would be tired. At this moment, the main god system's voice sounded, the next match, Kale against Deadpool. The audience cheered enthusiastically, but the main god system quickly added, Deadpool forfeits. Kale wins the match and advances to the semi-finals. Huh! The audience was stunned. The match was over before it even started. Chapter 647. Against Kale, the symbol of peace, it was normal for him to forfeit. Most of the audience quickly accepted this. On the contrary, Kale frowned slightly. He had watched many of the previous matches. With Deadpool's character, relying on his immortal body that healed quickly, even if he was not sure he could defeat his opponent, he would still try. Giving up like this was really not his style. It seems that you don't want to be alone with me. Kale muttered to himself, with a hint of understanding on his face. Although Deadpool was a creation of the card draw system, he did not need a creature card and was not within the scope of the master-servant contract. There were all kinds of strange creations in the sacrificial card draw, who knew that it would draw his head. After Deadpool's figure disappeared from the duel arena, the main god system continued to speak. The third round of the quarterfinals is between Scarlet Witch and Doctor Strange, abilities versus spells. The audience's eyes lit up slightly, and lively cheers rose again. This match was still very interesting. But before they could get excited, the main god system immediately added, Doctor Strange forfeited, the match is won by Scarlet Witch, advancing to the quarterfinals. The collective audience was stunned. Another forfeit, how could they watch the match? On the duel arena. Doctor Strange maintained his posture of giving up and smiled bitterly at Wanda, who was not far away. I know I'm not your opponent, so it's better to go out early and choose a position to watch the match between Mage Supreme and Mr. Kale. But I'm already very satisfied to be able to enter the top 8, higher than Brother Mo do. With that, Doctor Strange's figure disappeared from the duel arena. He had only practiced half of the spells he had learned. He had just come into contact with some of the spells in the forbidden books in the library and had not even started to practice them before he was forced to participate in the competition by Alpha Centauri, so he had no confidence in defeating Wanda. If he had mastered that kind of forbidden spell, then everything would be hard to say. Doctor Strange still felt a little regretful. After 2 consecutive forfeitures, there were only 2 people left on the duel arena, and the quarterfinals had not yet begun. Hellfire and Gluttony. This time, the main god system did not make a sound. K2, whose code name was Gluttony, raised his hand in advance and requested to forfeit. Hellfire was the gatekeeper of the kingdom of Karl. Its mount, the Black Flame Stallion, had been trained by K2 all the way. Seeing the Hellfire, K2 was already scared out of his wits, let alone fighting it. Hence, the top 8, which had received a lot of attention, had directly jumped to the top 4 after 3 consecutive matches where some people had forfeited. The audience couldn't help but laugh. No one had expected this. Kale's figure once again descended onto the dueling ground. Looking at the 4 people standing in the arena, namely Kale, Alpha Centauri, Hellfire, and Wanda, the audience realized that even among the top 8 contestants, there was still a huge gap in strength. And now, in the huge duel arena, the final 4 remaining were Earth's real top-notch combat power. This was also the prelude to the final battle. Now, let the semi-finals officially begin. According to the competition rules, the two matches would be held in different virtual spaces at the same time. The one who wins first can freely choose the battle scene in the finals. The main god system's mechanical and emotionless voice announced coldly, "Next. The semi-finals will be between Kale and the Scarlet Witch, Alpha Centauri and Hellfire. Random battle scene, Planet Kree Altar Hall." Kale and Wanda appeared at the two ends of the hall. Immediately, a faint torch rose from the side, providing some vision to the dark and silent hall. Planet Kree? Wanda looked around the hall in surprise, looking at the strange throne, stone pillars, and the altar full of carvings. "It's a civilization I encountered in the Milky Way Alliance." Kale smiled and explained, "That civilization is called the Kree Empire. The level of technology and military power is above Earth. The ruler is a brutal and powerful alien who tried to dominate the Milky Way Alliance. He had a starship fleet and a long hammer artifact, which gave us a lot of trouble at that time." "What happened later?" Wanda asked curiously. "Later, I killed it here." Kale's face was calm. There was no pride in his tone, just a simple fact. He said this to Wanda because he wanted to tell her. Don't just limit your vision to Earth. In the vast outer space, there are countless civilizations and powerful creatures. Wanda lowered her head. It was hard to imagine what kind of battles the man in front of her had gone through. Just meeting him in the World War II trial was like facing a killing god who had abandoned his emotions, a beast who only wanted to show its fangs and claws. "Me too. I want to see the battle between you and the Ancient One. I want to really see the heights you're standing at," Wanda said as she raised her right hand slightly. Just as she was about to admit defeat, Kale said calmly, "Then come up and experience it for yourself. Don't just look. If you want to save Lorna, you'll have to fight sooner or later. I can only tell you that our future opponents will be stronger than me now." Wanda was stunned for a moment. As if she understood something, she clenched her fists bit by bit. "Okay, I understand." She raised her beautiful eyes with determination. Red mist wrapped around her loosened palm. Majestic energy surged out of her body, distorting the dim light around her. "Your arcana talent is without a doubt number one on Earth." Kale's eyes had a hint of admiration. He raised his right hand, and a golden flame condensed in his hand. "But this isn't enough. You need enough motivation, obsession, and unwillingness to accept defeat. Only then can you become a true hero." This was his hope for Wanda. Kale waved his right hand, and the golden fireball blasted toward Wanda like a cannonball, leaving a cool trail of flames in the air. "Ha!" Wanda raised her hands to the side. The fierce fireball flew past her as if it was disturbed by some force. It landed on the stone pillar behind her and immediately melted a huge hole. And this was only the beginning. Once Kale attacked, he didn't plan to stop. His hands moved at the same time. Golden fireballs formed in an instant, and he threw them out continuously as long-range weapons. Seeing this, Wanda put her hands together and used the energy in the form of the red mist to create an energy net in front of her. The fireballs landed on the energy net continuously. The high temperature and flames swept out, turning most of the area in front of her into a sea of fire. Maintaining the energy net to resist the sea of fire, Wanda snorted softly. Hot sweat flowed down her delicate face and dripped onto the hot floor under her feet. However, she still managed to resist the first round of attacks. Just as Wanda's heart surged with joy, a large hand patted the back of her shoulder without warning. Kale's hot breath appeared beside Wanda's ear. "That's it. You're still far from it." Chapter 648. Scarlet Witch is defeated, Kale wins. Hellfire is defeated, Ancient One wins. Almost at the same time, Kale and Alpha Centauri return to the empty duel arena. After half a second of silence, the audience's loud cheers turned into a tidal wave that washed over the duel arena. The simulated starry sky at the top of the dome was almost blown away. What was about to begin was the final battle of this superpower tournament. It was also the final battle, which meant to determine who was the strongest on Earth. I didn't expect you to defeat Hellfire so quickly. Kale looked up at Alpha Centauri not far away. Alpha Centauri smiled and said, "That big guy is indeed very powerful, but it's too stubborn. I led it into the portal and teleported it out of the map." Kale suddenly understood. Leaving the limited battle map area was also considered a loss. This was one of the rules set early in the tournament. Interesting. Alpha Centauri, I look forward to the duel with you. Kale stared straight at Alpha Centauri. Before the battle began, his body was surging with fighting spirit. This was a battle that was almost a century late. At that time, Kale had only climbed to the peak of the secular world and could not be compared with the transcendent Alpha Centauri. But now, he was standing at the same height, or even higher. But no matter what, he could not be considered the strongest on Earth without defeating Alpha Centauri, who was known as the Guardian of Earth. Me too. This time, Alpha Centauri did not evade. She raised her eyes and looked at Kale calmly. As if to cater to the atmosphere before the battle between the two, the main god system came out in time to host. The final of this superpower tournament will be decided between Kale and Ancient One, then, let the battle begin. Although Kale and Alpha Centauri won at the same time, Kale was still a beat faster and won by 0.2 seconds. So, he chose the virtual battle map for the final battle. Kale did not want to take advantage of the map, so he simply chose the map scene that the two were most familiar with and the origin of everything, New York. The old New York of 70 years ago. In the old virtual New York of the old era, on the streets next to the western buildings, a cold wind blew through the streets and alleys, raising a cloud of dust. Kale and Alpha Centauri landed on both ends of the street. Venom took off the trench coat on Kale's body. He was wearing a black combat uniform, his handsome face with a hint of fanaticism, just like his youthful appearance during World War II. "I'm still missing this." Kyle smiled. With a wave of his hand, he pulled out a sodium-carbon steel sword and carried it on his back. His aggressive eyes stared straight at Ancient One, and he suddenly froze for a moment and looked down. "Ancient One, where is your necklace?" Only then did he realize the most important point. Alpha Centauri used to wear the necklace that hid the primordial stone of time whenever she went out. She would probably only feel at ease if she had it with her. The necklace was also the strongest weapon of the mage race. It could reverse the past and predict the future. But this time, she did not wear it. Ancient One lowered his head and looked at his empty chest with a smile on the corner of his mouth. "That thing, I entrusted it to someone else. Then I'll congratulate you in advance." Kyle was stunned, as if he had understood something. He vaguely knew what kind of mentality Alpha Centauri had now to participate in this competition. He laughed. "It's time for you to retire. Don't think that Earth can't do without you. It's the age of the young." "Thank you, but you're not a young person, are you?" Alpha Centauri smiled brightly. She had not smiled much for hundreds of years. Day and night, worrying about the invasion of the dark dimension, worrying about the safety of the primordial stone of time, and thinking about the successor in the future, it was hard to imagine how much pressure this woman had to endure in the past hundreds of years when there were no superheroes and mages were rare. She had to walk alone to this day. So even if she fell into darkness and trampled on her own principles, she had to continue living for Earth. This was the number one person on Earth in the past. Mage Supreme. Doctor Strange, who was looking at the screen outside, looked down at his chest. There was a necklace pendant hanging there, faintly flickering with a dark green light. Mo. stood silently at the side. There was no emotion on his dark face. No one knew what he was thinking. The match between Kale and Alpha Centauri had not yet begun. Mo Du quietly turned around and left the spectator square of the Cal country. Even Doctor Strange did not know that he had left. In the virtual space of old New York. Alpha Centauri, you are a hero worthy of admiration. I will not pity you, nor will I show you mercy. I will only use my strongest strength and attitude to defeat you. Kale clenched his fists tightly. A layer of dark cuticles suddenly appeared on his body, and his muscles expanded explosively. After a while, a black humanoid monster that symbolized slaughter and battle, violent and wild, appeared in the vision of hundreds of millions of viewers on Earth. That was Kale's symbiotic combat mode with Venom. Ever since Kale obtained the dual star form, he rarely used this mode. It was not that Venom's symbiotic mode was not strong. His current physique was already at the level of a Protoss. He could barely resist the aftermath of the supernova explosion. If he added Venom's symbiotic mode, he basically had no weaknesses except for flames and sound waves. It was just that he did not need to use his current attitude at all. His previous enemies, even if they were as strong as Leader Carey and God Igo, could be defeated with just the dual stars. There was no need for Venom at all. Venom's symbiotic mode. It was strong enough to allow Kale to eliminate his physical weaknesses and stack with his Protoss physique to infinitely strengthen himself. He did not need any energy support and was already the strongest creature on the surface. Even watching the match through the virtual screen, the audience still gasped. The Nissan and German viewers even exited the Skynet live stream with pale faces. Killer God, this was the original Killer God. Alpha Centauri, who was standing 10 meters away, frowned. She could feel that the surrounding air seemed to have solidified. It was not like Yutong's domain ability, but an unprecedentedly powerful pressure. Come! Kale growled at Alpha Centauri and the air suddenly exploded. He stomped his feet fiercely and the ground immediately collapsed, creating a hole. A frenzied white cyclone swept outwards. He was like a rocket launcher, turning into a black meteor and rushing towards Alpha Centauri at high speed. Alpha Centauri's expression changed slightly. Her movements were very fast, almost without chanting or performing seals. A half-real, half-fake golden wool had already appeared on her right palm. She pressed the golden wool forward. The magical patterns on the wheel continued to rotate, spread, and condensed into a real void shield in front of her. Boom! A dark fist landed on the golden shield, and at a speed visible to the naked eye, the shield began to crack and crack. Then, it began to shatter bit by bit. Alpha Centauri's eyes widened to the maximum. Chapter 649. Under Kale's full-powered punch, the magical shield that could resist missiles only lasted for half a second before shattering. Then, the power of the punch continued forward without diminishing. The high-speed punch formed a white cyclone and turned into a bulldozer, pushing forward inch by inch in the air. At this moment, the entire road seemed to have been swept by a hurricane. All the cars and street lights were wiped clean, gravel and dust flew everywhere, and the ground was left with burn marks from the friction of the punch. That punch just now, even if it was performed by the clone of Superman, who had an invincible physique, it would not be as powerful. On Earth, there were very few heroes who could take this punch. Kale maintained his posture of punching forward. His long and narrow white eyes contracted slightly, but the figure of Alpha Centauri had long disappeared in front of him. The moment the magical shield shattered, Alpha Centauri dodged. As expected of you, your reaction is really fast. But if you lose with one punch, wouldn't this battle be very boring? Kale whispered hoarsely. He looked up and saw the double image of reality and the mirror image. Alpha Centauri's figure was reflected in every corner. To avoid that punch in time, the only way was to move to the mirror image space. After all, there was only a thin line between the mirror image space and the real world. It was just that this thin line could only be seen through by mages. As the sovereign of the mages, Alpha Centauri's hundreds of years of magical power cultivation and comprehension, coupled with the power borrowed from the dark dimension, had greatly increased her influence on reality. Now, she could change the rules of this thin line at will. She did not need to spend time drawing circles to freely enter and exit the mirror image and reality. You think you can escape into the mirror image space? Kale snorted coldly. He stomped on the ground, and the ground caved in again, revealing the sewer pipes and cables at the bottom. He did not care which part was reality and which part was the mirror image. He only relied on his strong physique to aggressively rush toward the sky above the street dome. Clang! With his superhuman jumping ability, Kale jumped 50 meters high and crossed the old building next to him. His head suddenly hit a transparent boundary wall, and the blue sky shattered like a mirror. In the real world, the sky and the streets, everything had shrunk into the tiny mirror fragments, and everything fell down. The view in front of him suddenly opened up. Kale, who was jumping straight up, broke through the boundary wall of reality and continued to rush toward the area above. The scene changed. Above Kale's head was no longer the sky, but the streets of the old city. But he, who was originally jumping up, was now upside down, falling down to the street below. This is the mirror dimension. A look of understanding appeared in Kyle's eyes as he fell. It was Alpha Centauri. It made the line between the mirror image space and reality so ambiguous and blurry. Otherwise, no matter how strong his body was, it was impossible for him to break through the space with his head alone. Kale flipped in the air, adjusted his posture, and then landed straight on the ground with his feet. The road surface that had been ravaged in reality was also inevitably covered with spiderweb-like cracks in the mirror image space. You deliberately led me in because you have a greater influence on the space here. Kale looked up at the sky and said. Ancient One, who was hiding in the dark, didn't respond, but the whole mirror image New York City was shaking, as if an earthquake was shaking. The high-rise buildings of the old era were like dominoes, toppling over and turning over regularly. First, the shadow covered the road area. Then, countless high-rise buildings covered Kale, trying to bury him here. The city was a tomb, only to bury one person. The audience outside widened their eyes in horror as they watched this powerful spell move comparable to God. Alpha Centauri used this move to block the explosion of a nuclear bomb. Now, facing Kale, she used this move directly. This indirectly meant that Kale's existence was comparable to a human-shaped nuclear bomb. However, this was going against the entire city. Looking at the collapsed buildings tumbling toward Kale, the audience couldn't help but think. Should I say that she's worthy of being the Earth's guardian and sorcerer supreme? This move is too powerful and terrifying. It's simply unstoppable. Logan, who was in the watchtower, sighed. He finally understood why Kale had mentioned the existence of Alpha Centauri many times before. The Ancient One was really strong. She represented the peak of Earth's combat power. She was the first human hidden hero in hundreds of years. Inside the virtual mirror image of the old New York space. Good timing. Kale was not surprised but delighted. He grinned and raised his dark hand above his head, resisting the attack of the entire city with his body. Rumble. First, a tall tower fell on Kale's body. It was firmly held by his palms. Kale stepped on the ground that was already full of cracks and continued to shatter. His dark feet sank into the ground up to his ankles. This was just the beginning of everything. In the other three directions, several buildings fell on Kale's body. The incomparably heavy tonnage made his hands dangle close to the top of his head. His feet had completely sunk into the ground. The surrounding ground could not bear the burden and collapsed. Some tap water spewed out along the cracked ground. In the sky 100 meters above the city, Alpha Centauri stood on a suspended platform formed by magic. Her eyes had been dyed black and gray. The blue veins at the corners of her eyes bulged slightly. They were also dyed with a strange black color. Her body was full of a powerful and terrifying aura. She took a deep breath, closed her hands, and pressed them down. In accordance with the full power of the Ancient One, the tall buildings with Kale as the center were like waves that surrounded and slammed down from all directions. Rumble, the sound of buildings collapsing continued for quite a while. Kyle only managed to hold on for less than a second before his figure was buried under the rubble. In the next 10 seconds, more and more buildings came crashing down on him, one after another. This scene was a bit like the end of the world, but also a bit like the end of the universe. All the buildings in the entire city were toppled and destroyed one point at a time. The audience quietly watched this scene until everything in the mirror dimension was buried by Alpha Centauri as funerary objects for Kale. Even if the symbol of peace really lost to this move, there was nothing to say. In other words, losing to this move was natural. Alpha Centauri left the mirror dimension and returned to the real world. She fell from a height of hundreds of meters. Finally, she barely cast a spell and stepped on the air to slow down. Finally, she landed on the balcony of a tall building. That tall building was the New York Sanctum. Alpha Centauri chose to return here. She held the wall with her hand and coughed violently with a pale face. After a while, she seemed to realize something. She quickly raised her eyes and scanned the calm downtown New York below. The game had not been declared over yet. This meant, Kale survived that move. Chapter 650. In the virtual old New York City, on the open-air balcony of the New York Sanctum, Alpha Centauri's face was blank. Her dark eyes were a little sunken, and she looked very old at this moment. She stared blankly at the silent city, but she couldn't find any trace of Kale. The supreme sorcerer, who used to be omnipotent, lived for hundreds of years without aging, and suppressed the evil dimension, had become extremely helpless and fragile at this time. Just like an old woman, no one can resist the ravages of time. Even the strong ones like Alpha Centauri and Odin, one overseeing the earth and the other ruling the 9 realms, will grow old one day. After they grow old, their once resourceful brains will become dull, their once vigorous bodies will decay, and the powerful energy they once possessed will be worn out little by little. When this day really comes, it means that the old generation of the Marvel Universe has completely passed, and a new generation is about to be born. This is a reincarnation. But now, standing on the edge of reincarnation, Alpha Centauri still refused to admit that she was old. Until behind her, at the other end of the open-air balcony, there was a slight unnatural sound nearby. The sound was very subtle, but in her ears, it was extremely harsh, as if telling her, "You are really old." The expression on Alpha Centauri's face was first surprised, then it suddenly dawned on her, then it became sad, and finally it returned to its usual calmness. The black and gray luster in Alpha Centauri's eyes faded, and the blue veins in the corners of her eyes also calmed down. Without the power of the dark dimension, she looked a little tired and weak, but she felt relieved mentally. She turned around. It could be seen that someone had already come to the rooftop, sitting on the sun chair with his legs crossed, looking at her calmly. It was Kale. Kale wanted to completely defeat Alpha Centauri, so not only did he resist Alpha Centauri's strongest move, but he also returned to the real world early and waited for her here where Alpha Centauri was bound to arrive. He knew that Alpha Centauri would definitely return here. Now Kale has exited the Venom symbiotic form and is wearing ordinary casual clothes. Although his appearance is a bit messy, full of dust and wounds, there are no serious wounds. All of this was thanks to Venom. Because of this, Venom fell into a dormant state and returned to the card space. "How did you do it?" Alpha Centauri asked. The fact that she asked this question meant that Kale had already exceeded her understanding. "It's simple." Kyle smiled faintly and explained, "As long as your physique is strong enough to withstand the weight of the entire city and the destructive energy, then break through the unstable dimensional barrier as quickly as possible before you return to the real world and arrive here one step ahead of you, it'll be fine. Ancient One was silent. This process was simple, but even if he wanted to implement it, it would be more difficult than he imagined. But Kale did it perfectly and appeared in front of her. I have to say, you are now far beyond my expectations. Alpha Centauri sighed softly. She vaguely remembered the Major General Kale who stood in front of her. At that time, Kale was cautious and sharp, miraculously pacifying World War II. But now Kale's flashy appearance has faded away and he has returned to his original state. Kale looked at Alpha Centauri and smiled. Alpha Centauri. In the future, it will be the generation of young people. There is no need to stare at Earth all day long. If the sky falls, the young people will carry it. Alpha Centauri smiled. What about you? I'm still very young. Kale spread his hands. He was indeed young, but this so-called young was calculated according to his total lifespan. The lifespan of a Protoss is at least tens of thousands of years. He is only 100 years old now, is he not young? Alpha Centauri said softly, then Earth. I'll leave it to you. Kale froze for a moment. He knew that Alpha Centauri had finally let go of her obsession. This simple sentence contained hundreds of years of hard work, and at this moment, it seemed indescribably heavy. Okay. Kale pursed his lips and smiled, leave it to me. Alpha Centauri was silent for a moment, looked straight at Kale and asked, after you win the finals of this superpower competition, I will be second. I remember that the reward for second place is that you can satisfy any request of the person who proposed it? That's right. If you have any requests, you can make them now. Kale nodded generously. Even if Alpha Centauri asked for 100 years of life extension, or even a civilized planet, he would do his best to satisfy. Alpha Centauri did not speak. She looked at the old city outside with a nostalgic look in her eyes. Finally, her gaze returned to the open-air balcony. On the withered branches of the potted plant, green and tender sprouts sprouted. Alpha Centauri said calmly, I want you to take care of Stephen Strange. He is the best student I have ever seen. He can inherit the Camartage Mage clan, but you are not allowed to force him to join any force. That's it? Kale looked at her seriously, you have to know that even if you need lifespan or resources, I can satisfy you. That's it. Alpha Centauri nodded and insisted on her decision. Kale seemed to understand something. He thought for a moment and immediately agreed, no problem, I can promise you now. In the future, as long as I am here, I will protect your mage clan and will not recruit Stephen Strange. He can choose what force he wants to join. That's good. Alpha Centauri's face showed a smile. People do grow old and die, but people have a legacy. As long as the legacy was still there, she would still exist in the world. I admit defeat. With Alpha Centauri's last words, the virtual New York space of the old era completely came to an end. Alpha Centauri admits defeat. The winner is Kale. The superpower competition held in the Cal country was also coming to an end. After the main god system publicly announced the results, the dazed audience in the audience seats finally understood. The superpower competition was indeed over. But everyone knew that after the competition, the world would be turned upside down and a new era would begin. When the superpower's nuclear bombs no longer had the highest deterrence, humans would boldly try another evolutionary path. The treaty that restricted the actions of the heroes, under the strength of Kale and the superheroes, seemed so pale and powerless. It was broken in one blow. After all, in the face of absolute strength, not to mention hundreds of countries joining forces to suppress Kale, even if the entire Earth crusaded against him, it would not cause any real harm to him. Without deterrence, it meant that there was no restriction. After the battle with Alpha Centauri, Kale was no longer a symbol of peace, but the true lord of the Earth. His status was even above the gods that humans believed in. Of course. This battle also led to many hidden dangers in reality. Chapter 651. In the central square of the Cal country. Strange Dr. Stephen Strange suddenly turned around and saw a figure in a magic robe appear out of thin air and gently land behind him. Mage Supreme. Strange bowed to Alpha Centauri. His face buried in the shadows was full of hesitation, as if he wanted to say something. Alpha Centauri seemed to know what he was thinking and said softly, "Okay. If there's anything, wait until we return to Kamartaj." Okay. Strange nodded. In the end, he chose to believe in Alpha Centauri. He believed that no matter what she did, she must have her own reasons and difficulties. Alpha Centauri glanced at the area of the square and did not see Modu's figure. She could not help but ask in surprise, where did Mage Modu go? The three of them went out together to participate in the superpower competition. Naturally, the three of them returned together. I don't know. Strange shook his head and frowned slightly. He thought for a while and said, I just noticed. Mage Modu didn't seem to be watching the finals. Instead, he left the Cal country in advance. Alpha Centauri muttered and her expression changed slightly. She stared at Strange and asked, did he say anything to you? No. Strange continued to shake his head and said, since watching the later part of the competition, Mage Modu has been silent. It seems that he has something on his mind. Even when he left just now, he left quietly and did not tell me. Oh no. Alpha Centauri sighed and looked up at the distant sky. It must be the appearance of Cassius and the others that provoked Mage Modu. Strange thought of the three people in black cloaks and said to himself, just now, the man who brought the other two mages to participate in the superpower competition? Cassius. Alpha Centauri muttered the name, his eyes filled with complex emotions. A few years earlier than you, he also trained in Kamartaj. He is an extremely talented genius mage. Unfortunately, he later fell into the dark dimension and became Damumu's servant. Now, he was the leader of the dark mages. He has been lurking on Earth, trying to sneak into Kamartaj and steal the forbidden secret book of time magic. Then Wizard Modu, Strange, he suddenly had a bad premonition. Wizard Modu's heart is as firm as steel, and he has his own opinions. Once he's decided on something, it's hard to change his mind. He has always hated the dark dimension and hated traitors even more. Alpha Centauri paused and suddenly remembered something. He looked at Strange and quickly urged, quick. Follow me back to Kamartaj. I'm afraid something has happened there. At this moment. Kamartaj, an empty practice hall. Wizard Modu stood at the entrance of the main hall. He had ordered more than a dozen mages to prepare their magic tools and prepare for battle. Then, he opened Kamartaj's magic protection, allowing Kamartaj's existence to break away from the camouflage protection of the dimension and magic, completely exposing it to Earth. Sha sha sha, bright sparks rotated into a circular door, and a bald man holding a stick magic tool walked out from it. He was the current guardian of the New York Sanctum, King. His strength was ranked in the top 3 among the mages, second only to Modu. King looked at the fully armed mages in the hall and asked Modu with a cold face, Wizard Modu, what have you done? Modu's dark face was expressionless. It's simple. Haven't those traitors who fell into the dark dimension been spying on Kamartaj's library? I'm giving them a chance now, let them come over. You're crazy. King did perceive that Kamartaj's outer defense had been weakened to the lowest point. He couldn't help but shout, quickly reactivate Kamartaj's defense. Or else. It's too late. Wizard Modu interrupted him and said to King, if even you can sense it, how can those traitors who absorbed the power of the dark dimension be so slow? Following Wizard Modu's words, at the other end of the hall corridor, there was a rustling sound, and a magic door formed by sparks opened. Among them, led by Cassius, a team of mages in robes and uniforms, each with a thick black light in their eyes, entered Kamartaj from the other side of the door. The mages in the main hall picked up their magic tools, as if they saw their mortal enemy, and confronted the dark mages. King knew that he couldn't stop all of this from happening, so he could only walk to Modu's side. He held the stick magic tool tightly, gritted his teeth, and whispered, "You open Pandora's box." Wizard Modu didn't seem to hear anything, and his cold eyes fell on Cassius. "It's been a long time. Camartage, I'm finally back." Cassius scanned the things in the hall with familiarity, and he laughed crazily. His dark eyes looked at Wizard Modu and King, "My two seniors, how have you been?" Wizard Modu said coldly, "Shut up, I don't have a junior like you, a traitor who sold his soul and body to the dark dimension." Cassius laughed out loud, "Did you forget that in today's competition, even that woman also absorbed the power of the dark dimension? She didn't age, and her control over reality has increased. This is the best proof." This sentence seemed to have stabbed Wizard Modu's sore spot. He clenched his fists hard, and his nails pierced into his palms. He coldly issued an order, "All mages in Camartage, today, follow me to eradicate the traitors of the dark dimension. Leave no one alive." "Yes." The mages responded in unison, full of energy. "Today is the day of your Camartage clan's destruction, and also the day Earth will return to the dark dimension." Cassius coldly waved his hand forward, and led the dark mages to launch a fierce attack on the mages led by Wizard Modu for a moment. Magic weapons flashed, and star arrays appeared. Voids flew everywhere, and whips lashed out. Both sides cast their spells, and the battle was extremely chaotic. On this day, the Holy Land, which had been away from mortal wars for hundreds of years, finally welcomed a fierce battle. Wizard Camartage and the Dark Dimension mages, the two factions were destined to fight to the death. Sparks spun in the air, and Alpha Centauri and Strange rushed back to Camartage's main hall from the Cal country. Strange's footsteps stopped. The once quaint main hall had become a mess, and there were more than 10 mages' corpses lying on the ground. Some were stabbed to death by cold voids, and some were strangled to death by scorching whips. The scene after the battle was like hell, and the smell of blood lingered in every corner. "We're a step late," Strange said with a pale face. "Yes, but not completely late." Alpha Centauri looked at the corpses on the ground, and sadness flashed in his eyes. He looked up at the ceiling, there in the mirror dimension, and the winner hasn't been decided yet. Chapter 652. In Nepal's mirror world. The space inside was changing irregularly. The tall buildings were twisting and turning at will like squares. In the gaps between the buildings, the people were as small as ants. It was as if they were walking on steel wires. Any carelessness and they would be crushed into minced meat. However, the buildings would turn left and right at times. There was no direction to attack. It was obvious that there were many mages fighting for control of the mirror world. "Give up. You can't beat us in here." Cassius sneered. He landed on the roof of the building. Beside him were 4 dark mages. On the other side, only Modu and Wang were left. Mordu panted heavily. He stepped on the side wall of the tall building opposite him and grabbed the air with his left hand. He wanted to make the tall building that Cassius and the others were standing on collapse. "Ridiculous. I'll let you have a taste of despair." Cassius pressed down with both hands. The building Modu and Wang were on immediately flipped to the other side. The 2 people walking on it fell. Cassius continued to increase his control of the space. Modu and Wang could not change the space for a while. The ground below them caved in infinitely, causing them to fall into an endless loop. "It's over." Cassius clasped his hands. The surrounding buildings moved horizontally and contracted. It looked like the falling Modu and Wang would be crushed into minced meat. Buzz, a few of the buildings suddenly stopped shrinking and separated in all directions. The sunken ground at the bottom also rose up bit by bit. Cassius's expression changed. He could clearly feel that the owner of the mirror world had returned. The control of the mirror world in his hands was forcefully taken away. The only person who could do this in front of him was that woman, Alpha Centauri. Everyone, including the building Cassius was standing on, retreated in all directions. A large space was emptied. In the center, a floating platform was completed. Strange patterns were carved on the platform. It looked like a huge mage's shield. A Martian door was still spinning in the air. Alpha Centauri in a yellow robe and hat landed on the platform. Strange followed behind him. Ta-ta. Mo Du and Wang landed on one side of Alpha Centauri, while Cassius and the other 4 dark mages landed on the other side of the floating platform. As expected, you have really absorbed the power of the dark dimension. Cassius licked his dry lips and stared coldly at the Ancient One. The Forbidden Time spell was secondary. As long as he could kill the woman in front of him, it would only be a matter of time before the dark dimension devoured the earth. Alpha Centauri did not speak. He raised his right hand and held a golden chakram in his palm. Is this true? Sorcerer Supreme? That's something that can't be tainted. You're the one who said so. Wang looked at Alpha Centauri in disbelief. He did not watch the superpower competition and was the last to know about it. Don't worry about that, let's eliminate the traitor first. Mo Du snorted and interrupted King's question. Then let's give it a try. Cassius grasped the air with both hands and created 2 void falling. Before he could move, the silent Alpha Centauri took the initiative to meet him. Let's go too. Mo Du, Wang, and Strange rushed forward at the same time. Their target was the other 4 dark mages. Ka! The silver falling stabbed the golden shield and sparks flew. Cassius and Alpha Centauri fought. In a short period of time, they exchanged more than 10 moves. It's useless. Alpha Centauri, you're already old. It's our time now. The leader of the dark dimension will devour the earth sooner or later. Since you've also absorbed the dark energy, why don't you join me and become immortal under Master's touch? Cassius kept saying these words to disturb Alpha Centauri's state of mind. However, Alpha Centauri did not pay any attention to him. She held the golden shield in her right hand and switched from defense to offense. She began to suppress Alpha Centauri into an absolute disadvantage. If this goes on, I'll lose. Damn old woman, even though she's old, she's still so strong. Cassius cursed in his heart. Suddenly, he saw something from the corner of his eyes. Suddenly, he had an idea and quickly threw the falling in his hand. The falling seemed to have been thrown in the wrong direction. Alpha Centauri easily dodged it. However, at this moment, she saw Cassius's strange smile. Alpha Centauri's gaze chased after the falling. She realized that the target was not her from the beginning. Instead, it was Strange who was fighting the dark mage behind her. Strange did not notice the impending danger and was using a magic cloak to entangle a dark mage. No! Alpha Centauri shouted. The moment before the falling hit Strange, Alpha Centauri took a step forward and crossed a distance of more than 10 meters. She used her body as a meat shield in front of Strange. Whoosh! The falling hit Alpha Centauri's chest and sank into her body. She fell out of the floating platform. Ancient One. Mo Du and Wang, who were fighting the dark mage, looked at this scene in shock. Even Cassius was stunned. He did not expect Alpha Centauri to go to this extent for a new disciple. It's over. Cassius smiled. He waved his hand and opened a portal. He and the rest of the dark mages evacuated. The Ancient One was dead. The time spell and the lives of the other mages were no longer important. New York City, Central Neurology Hospital. Strange, who was wearing a magic cloak, was as anxious as a child. He carried Alpha Centauri, who was on the verge of death, and suddenly broke into the emergency room. He placed Alpha Centauri on the operating table and put the equipment on her. But before he could check the wound, the monitor that monitored the heartbeat showed a straight line. Alpha Centauri was dead. The omnipotent Sorcerer Supreme was dead. How is this possible? Strange could not believe this fact. Then, he saw a white shadow fly out of Alpha Centauri's body. Sorcerer Supreme. Strange ignored the strange gazes of his former colleagues in the hospital. He chased out of the ward and came to the corridor outside the hospital. Alpha Centauri's soul was floating at the edge of the corridor, quietly looking at the night. Sorcerer Supreme, what are you doing? Hurry up and return to your body. Strange shouted at her. It's been a long time since I've looked at the night in such a relaxed manner. Alpha Centauri's soul looked up at the stars and said to Strange, from now on, I'll leave everything to you. Strange. Although I'm leaving Earth to Kale to protect, I hope that person is you. After saying this, Alpha Centauri's soul suddenly collapsed and turned into countless stars floating into the night sky. Strange stared blankly, tears already streaming down his face. In the main hall of the watchtower, Kale stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling window and looked down at Earth below. There was a hint of sadness in his eyes. He whispered, Alpha Centauri, rest in peace. Passing away was Alpha Centauri's choice. Dying for the disciple who inherited her beliefs was also the best ending she could accept. Alpha Centauri is too tired, let her rest a little. Chapter 653. Comitage Hall. Strange opened the portal and returned here from the hospital. In the chaotic and bloody hall, Mage Mo stood on the stage, looking at the temple that had changed. She's dead. Strange had wiped away the tears on his face, calmly telling the truth. Mo looked back at him and whispered, she's not what I thought. Strange was silent for a moment, then said, her heart is also very complicated. I know. But the dark dimension is more dangerous, this is what she warned us from the moment we stepped into this temple. In the end, she sucked the power from the dark dimension and extended her lifespan by hundreds of years. Even if Alpha Centauri was dead, Mo still could not accept this. This was the principle that mages regarded as equal to life, the principle of the mages. In the end, the supreme mage who founded Comitage trampled on this principle early on. She did what she thought was right. Strange could only reply like this, and sighed, now she has paid the price. But her actions brought countless fanatics to Dormammu, and we have become her pawns. Mo clenched his fists. What was the use of saying more now, everything had become a fact. Now is not the time to talk about this. Strange stared at him and sincerely persuaded, we lost Alpha Centauri, Comitage was destroyed, and the New York Temple was also attacked by the Dark Mages after the king left. Once all three temples are captured, Dormammu will be able to set foot on Earth, we need to rush to the last temple. In Xiangang. Mo sorted out his emotions, raised his hand and drew a circle, opening a magic portal. Mo and Strange rushed through the portal, and the scene in front of them changed into the bustling city blocks of the east. Unfortunately, they were still a step too late. At this time, the city blocks were in a mess, the night sky was torn by an evil black substance, and something seemed to be coming out of the void. The overflowing dark energy alone was enough to annihilate the surrounding city buildings, and countless people screamed and fled. Cassius and the two dark wizards stood at the bottom of the street overflowing with dark energy, waiting respectfully for the arrival of the Lord of the Dark Dimension. We were a step too late. The temple here has been destroyed. From behind Mo and Strange, King regretfully walked forward and looked at the space that was being torn apart bit by bit, as well as the powerful and terrifying dark energy. The three temples have all been destroyed, and the space where Earth is located has lost its protection. Domum is coming, and no one can stop this. Will Earth come to an end tonight? Strange helplessly lowered his head and looked at the pendant he was wearing. Everything happened too early, he didn't even have the time to learn how to use temporal magic. Despair, deep despair. The remaining mages were helpless and could only watch helplessly as a hole was torn in the night sky. An extremely terrifying existence was about to step onto Earth from another dimension. When it completely descended on Earth, everything would cease to exist, and everything would return to the dark dimension. Hold on, what's that? At this moment, King raised his head in surprise and gazed at the western night sky. There was a dazzling meteor streaking across the sky at an extremely fast speed, falling in their direction. That's... Strange widened his eyes in surprise and joy. He could not help but cry out, "Mr. Kale. The symbol of peace, the master of Earth, Kale." He descended from the sky like a meteor before hovering in front of the hole in space. In his dual star form, the energy that erupted from Kaya was almost tangible, like a fire that burned brighter and brighter. He was like a dazzling star that began to suppress and eliminate the overflowing dark energy. "It's you again." From within the void, an evil eye as large as a star coldly peeped at Kyle, who was floating in the air, through the gaps of the void. "Domum, it's been a while." Kyle and the eye looked at each other. The two of them were in different dimensions, separated by a tear in space as they looked at each other. They had fought each other a long time ago. Kale could still clearly remember that it was Domum who had caused trouble when he created Superman's clone. It had almost caused Superman's clone and half of his soul to be injured. "When I get here, I'll definitely kill you." Domum roared in the dark dimension. A tangible sound wave passed through the hole, shattering the glass doors and windows of the city. Most of the people in Xiangang were forced to cover their ears. The evil dark energy wreaked havoc, wanting to continue expanding the hole. Even Kale's dual star energy could not suppress it all. Domum. After all, it was equivalent to a dimensional avatar. Its existence surpassed time and space, and even all concepts. It was indeed extremely powerful. If it came over, no one on Earth could stop it. Alpha Centauri could not, and neither could Kale. Unfortunately, it could not come over. Kale smiled confidently. He drew a card from his card space and summoned it. It was a sapphire. The spatial origin stone. Kale, in his dual star form, held the spatial origin stone and used his own energy to induce the activation of the spatial origin stone. The spatial origin stone flashed with a dazzling blue luster. Where the light shone, the dark energy was like fog meeting sunlight, melting away in the blink of an eye. Domum had indeed transcended the concept of time and space, but that was only in the dimensional domain. As long as it did not enter Earth, the dark energy could not be completely released. The spatial origin stone was a Marvel Universe dimension. It was a creation that controlled the rules of space. Using it to block the penetration of Domum's energy was simple. The energy of the spatial origin stone filled the air, covering the hole in the void and repairing the space at a speed visible to the naked eye. "Damn it, damn it, damn it. Kale, I will remember you. Sooner or later, there will be a day." Before Domum could finish his words, the hole in the void had been completely repaired. No sound could be transmitted out, and the dark energy dissipated with the wind. "I like it when you don't see eye to eye with me, but you can't kill me. You can continue to stay in that dimensional cage." Kale muttered to himself. He put away the spatial origin stone and landed on the chaotic street. The energy of the dual stars converged into his body. You stopped, Master, how is this possible?" Cassius looked at Kale walking towards him and opened his mouth in disbelief. In his understanding, even if Kale was strong enough to defeat Alpha Centauri, it should be impossible for him to compete with Domum's master. If Kale's current strength was at the stellar level, then Domum was at the World King level. The two were not on the same level at all. "You were the one who killed Alpha Centauri?" Kale asked softly. Yes, so what? Cassius's voice was trembling. He solemnly looked at Kale and stretched out his hands, forming two void-fouling blades. Just as the two void-fouling blades appeared in his hands, Cassius froze, because Kale had already disappeared. Then, he felt an extremely painful burning sensation in his chest. That burning energy melted his flesh and directly evaporated his heart into nothingness. Too slow, did you think I would give you a chance to use a spell? At the end of his life, Cassius heard Kale's voice behind him. End of chapter. Chapter 654. It was too fast. Everything happened too fast. By the time everyone reacted, Cassius was already lying on the ground. His chest had been melted by the golden flames. Even if he had the power of the dark dimension, he was still dead. Kale walked past Cassius. He blew out the golden flames on his index finger and glanced at the two dark mages beside Cassius. Like mice that saw a cat, the two dark mages trembled in fear. In front of Kale, they did not even have the slightest thought of escaping. Because if they did, they would die faster and more miserably. The two dark mages followed their instincts and knelt down, their lowered heads touching the dirty ground. They were afraid of death, extremely afraid of death. Otherwise, they would not have fallen into the dark dimension, and Kale could be said to be the spokesperson of the Grim Reaper. It's up to you to decide what to do with them. Kale's gaze retracted from the two dark mages and fell on Strange and the others in front of him. Yes, Mr. Kale. King was the first to react. He walked towards the two dark mages kneeling on the ground, intending to capture them alive and bring them back to the New York Holy Temple to give an explanation to the mages that were injured. Mr. Kale, Strange looked at Kale, who was walking over, and said with difficulty, "The Ancient One, I know." Kale walked forward and patted Strange's shoulder. He said calmly, "She entrusted everything to you. You can decide what to do in the future. But the earth is now. Even if the sky falls, I will hold it up." After Kale finished speaking, the power of the two stars gushed out from his body again. He turned into a dazzling meteor and quickly left the streets of Xiangang, leaving towards the western horizon. His magic cloak fluttered in the wind. Strange stood on the street in a daze. He really had to think carefully about what he should do next. Since Kale was enough to stop Domum's invasion, was there a need for the Holy Temple to exist? Mage Modu, who was standing behind Strange, did not speak. He turned around and left the scene alone. No one knew what he was thinking, and no one knew where he was going. Today, the Kamartaj Mage clan had lost a supreme. Their mission had ended, and many people had died. No one knew what the remaining mages should do. They had to find the answers themselves. A meteor streaked across the night sky. Kyle did not return to the kingdom of Karl, nor did he return to the watchtower. Instead, after crossing the ocean and land, he landed on the crowded streets of New York City. Before landing, Kale took out the poison card in advance and disguised his appearance so that no one could recognize him. Otherwise, his appearance here would definitely cause a commotion in the city. Kale casually strolled along the street and bought a bag of apples. Finally, he stopped in front of a residential building at the crossroads. He approached the door and pressed the doorbell. "Coming, coming." After a while, an old voice came from behind the door. The door slowly opened. A gray-haired, one-eyed old man with an apron around his neck opened the door with his withered hand. His right eye stared at Kale outside the door. "Why are you here?" the one-eyed old man asked. "If you can come here, why can't I?" Kale smiled and gestured to the apple in his hand. "Aren't you going to invite me in?" "Come in, we can have dinner while you're at it." The one-eyed old man happily reached out to take the apple in Kale's hand and led him into the house. Kale let Poison turn his shoes into slippers and walked into the house. Looking at the simple and natural furniture and decorations, he nodded and commented, "This house is not bad." "It is." Loki found this, but it was a little noisy during the day. The one-eyed old man put the apple on the table and asked Kale to sit down. He then walked into the kitchen and took out half a roasted lamb and wine. "Looking at you, you're living well on Earth." Kale, who was sitting in the dining chair, looked at the sumptuous roasted lamb on the table. It was roasted golden and emitted a strong fragrance after sprinkling the toppings. "I guessed you would come and prepared it. I don't usually eat these." The one-eyed old man smiled and sat across from Kale and poured wine into his cup. "It's really good." Kale smiled indifferently. He didn't hold back. He rolled up his sleeves and tore off a large piece of lamb leg and put it into his mouth to take a bite. The one-eyed old man picked up the wine glass and took a sip of wine. If the creatures of the 9 worlds saw this scene, they would be stunned. Kale, the guardian of the divine realm, the dragon of the Milky Way alliance, the Lord of Earth, and Odin, the supreme of the 9 worlds, the father of all gods, the master of the divine realm, the two were so down to earth as they ate meat and drank wine in a private house in New York on Earth. Kale finished a lamb leg and drank the wine in the glass. He looked at Odin and said, "If I'm not wrong, it should be Loki who put you here, right? Now he should be disguised as you and enjoy being the master of the divine realm in the celestial palace." Odin didn't comment and continued to drink. "I've always had a question. Since the battle with the illusion, the question in my heart has become stronger." Kale looked directly at Odin and asked curiously, "Back then, why did you choose me as the guardian of the divine realm and let me take away the eternal fire?" Odin responded calmly, "Didn't you inherit the divine power of the former fire god?" "No. Back then, you should have known that the true divine power of the fire god was hidden in my body." Kale shook his head. Even now, he had a very sharp sense of different types of energy, let alone Odin who was still in charge of the divine realm. Now that he thought about it, it was as if Odin had deliberately found a reason to let him be the guardian of the divine realm and gave him the eternal fire. "You need to find the answer yourself. Due to some reasons, I can't tell you the truth directly." Odin refilled their glasses with wine. He raised his glass and raised it. "Drink with me one last time." Although Kale had many questions in his heart, when he saw Odin raise his glass, he smiled helplessly. He raised his glass and clinked it with Odin's. Ding! The clinking glass let out a leisurely crisp sound, as if it had pierced through the years. Odin's turbid right eye showed a trace of reminiscence, but it quickly disappeared. He drank the wine in his glass and said coldly, "You can go. We don't have to meet again." Since the other party didn't want to say, Kale didn't ask any more. He drank the wine, put down the glass, and turned to leave Odin's room. After Kale left, Odin sat alone on the chair, looking at the roast lamb on the table and the empty glass in a daze like an old man. After a long time, he whispered, "I really don't want you to see me like this." Chapter 655. A month passed. A month after the superpower competition in the Cow country, the discussion about the competition finally calmed down a little. However, because of these competitions that far exceeded common knowledge and subverted ideas, the changes in the world had only just begun. First of all, the general public around the world generally deepened their understanding of superheroes and superhumans. On major online platforms, some bloggers and researchers also carried out detailed analysis and data of the abilities of the contestants who had participated in the superpower competition, and a reasonable ranking was created. Of course, the first in this ranking was naturally Kale, the Lord of the Earth. The dead Sorcerer Supreme, Alpha Centauri, was still in second place and would not change for the time being. As for the ranking from the third place down, there was no accurate and reliable way of saying it. Some people said that Scarlet Witch was in third place, some said that Yutong, Illusion, and Hellfire were also qualified, and some said that Iron Man's sixth place was too low. The news media and entertainment magazines were in a heated argument every day because of the ranking. No one could convince the other for the time being. Ever since the superpower competition, superheroes and superhumans were more popular and paid more attention than the celebrities in the past. Some big countries also loosened the restrictions on superheroes and were far less strict than before. They also developed technology in secret and explored ways to evolve. If there was anything that the superpower competition had changed, it could only be said that it allowed superheroes and superhumans to live under the sun. Not only were the big countries paying attention, but the general public was also accepting and getting to know them. Superhumans could not trample on the law at will. After the superpower competition, everyone knew about the strong foundation of the cow country. The man sitting high on the throne was like a god looking down on the planet, and all unnatural things were under his jurisdiction. The Lord of the Earth was a title given by the countries and people of the world after the United States symbol of peace. During this 1 month, Kale did not leave the cow country, but discussions about him still dominated the news headlines every day. On the other side, Captain America and Winter Soldier temporarily left the Avengers, perhaps because they were worried about the fallacy, and no one knew where they went. Iron Man was still the main force of the Avengers, but he rarely acted with Black Widow and the others. He only increased his cooperation with PIM Technology, privately trained a high school student in Queens, New York, and was busy preparing for his grand wedding with Little Pepper. The Scarlet Witch and the Quicksilver twins temporarily left the Avengers and returned to the cow country. Doctor Strange, on the other hand, was officially the successor of the Alpha Centauri, shouldering the heavy responsibility of the sorcerers. He was stationed in the New York Sanctum as the guardian of the Earth. Superman Caesar and Hulk Banner were still missing, and Thor had not been to Earth for a long time. Everything on Earth calmed down for the time being. No one knew if this was the calm before the storm. Africa, Wakanda, Palace Hall. T'Challa, who had just become the new king, was sitting on the throne and receiving 2 guests. But the vibranium hall suddenly trembled, as if something had opened at the bottom. Outside the hall, the captain of the guards, Oki, was holding a vibranium spear. He led a few other black female guards and looked cautiously at the 2 people who suddenly walked out of the basement of the vibranium palace. One of them was a young and handsome silver-haired youth, while the other was a bald man with a peculiar appearance. Although both of them were wearing ordinary casual clothes, the pressure emanating from either of them was enough to make Oki, who was the strongest among the guards, change his expression. The other party was more terrifying than the beasts outside. But as the most powerful and sharpest spear in Wakanda, Oki still tried his best to wield the vibranium spear against the intruder who broke into the palace. With the strength of both hands, the tip of the spear fiercely stabbed at the relatively young silver-haired young man. Chi! The air was directly pierced by the vibranium spear. This attack had already surpassed the ability of humans. Coupled with the rare vibranium material, even steel would be easily pierced through. Not bad. Kale smiled indifferently. For humans, this spear attack was so fast that it was almost invisible. Unfortunately, in his eyes, it was like a lag of a few seconds. It was too slow. Even if he did not use his dual star form, it was still a little too slow for him. Yep, if he took it too seriously, he would be bullying ordinary people. Just as the vibranium spear was about to land on his throat, Kale extended 2 fingers with lightning speed and firmly caught the tip of the spear. There was a clear thrum of metal, and the wind that it kicked up blew his silver hair up slightly. Kaya flicked her finger, and with a clang, the vibranium spear was forcefully knocked away by a force. The vibranium spear almost flew out of his hand. Oki's eyes narrowed violently as he grabbed the vibrating spear with both hands, until his palms began to bleed. Not only had he caught her vibranium spear with his bare hands, just a casual flick of his finger was far more powerful than her. A monster. Only a humanoid monster could do something like that. Stop. Just as Oki was thinking about stopping the intruder even if he had to pay with his life, the new king's voice rang out from behind him. "King, we've discovered 2 intruders. They're extremely dangerous." Oki and the guards moved to one side as they continued to watch Kale and Illusion cautiously. "They're not intruders." T'Challa shook his head and looked at Kale. He bowed and greeted him politely, "Teacher Kale." "Teacher?" The guards of Wakanda were stunned. Kale shook his head gently and said, "I've never taught you anything. My combat teacher is my father, and my father's teacher is you. So you're obviously my teacher," smiled T'Challa. "The former king's teacher?" The Wakanda guards sucked in a breath of cold air. They looked at Kyle in disbelief. How long could such a young man have lived? "Kale?" A short-haired young man walked out from the hall behind T'Challa. He looked at Kale curiously. "Why have you come?" "Steve, so you're here." Kale's gaze continued to move to the back and saw the Baki standing beside Steve. Only then did he realize that T'Challa had been entertaining them. "We've gotten to know each other after a fight." T'Challa smiled and asked Kale curiously, "Teacher Kale, you must have used the magic door in the basement a few decades ago to come here. Is there something important that you've come here for?" "There is indeed something." Kale pointed at the yellow gem on Illusion's forehead, who had been silent all this while. "He wants to remove the ore from his forehead. Our Cal country isn't completely confident. I think you might have the technology to do so." "Even you aren't confident?" T'Challa frowned and muttered, "It'll be easier to say after my sister sees it. If you like my Marvel Infinite Draw card, please add it to your collection. My Marvel Infinite Draw card is the fastest to update." You're tuning in to the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.